Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Susie Horton, and I am the Chair of Planning for this year and more of relevance for this meeting. I am going to do some I know I have to do some housekeeping first. So, some of you have heard this before, but if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lifts. And assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. To comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who did sign in reception, please sign out when you leave the building. Regarding live web streaming, there obviously is public seating where some people are sitting. However, this meeting has also been webcast to allow the public to watch it remotely if they wish. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. The public seating area is not in view of the cameras used to webcast this meeting. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not want to be recorded. So please, can everyone speaking make sure that they use the microphones and also get close to the microphones so that we can hear clearly, and also remember to switch them off when you have finished speaking. In terms of voting, when voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes has been stated, and we'll do for and against and abstentions. And I think that's the housekeeping. So, introductions. I've introduced myself. So I'm going to start by introducing the other councillors in the room. So if I start with Councillor Mason.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
Councillor Peter Candlish.
Councillor Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Mary Vallely for Cosham and Wimmering.
Councillor Russell Simpson, I'm actually covering for Councillor Cordy.
Councillor Derek North for Cosham and Wimmering.
Welcome to all the councillors who are on this committee. I'd now like to ask people who are doing deputations to also introduce themselves. So I'll start at the back with Councillor Swan.
Councillor Benedict Swan for Copner and Anchorage Park Ward, speaking on 275 Laburnum Grove.
Welcome.
Jacob Short, Fratton campaigner, speaking against 92 Kingston Road.
Welcome, Jacob.
Jonathan Risbridger, speaking on 129 New Road.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Carrie-Anne Wells, agent for Applecore, speaking on behalf of 92 Kingston Road.
Welcome, Carrie-Anne.
Paul Beach, East Hants Properties, speaking on behalf of 180 Stride.
Welcome, Paul.
John Middleton, I'm the applicant for 58 Stanley Avenue.
Welcome. Welcome, Paul.
Julian Childs, resident of Burbage, speaking against 25.
Not too sure whether...
12.
Can you turn your microphone off, Paul?
Me?
Yes, please. If
the mic's on. Sorry, my apologies. I forgot to turn it off.
No worries. No worries at all.
I think I'll just say, don't press and hold. Just press singularly to start and then again to stop.
Julian Childs, resident of Burbage Grove.
Welcome, Julian. You won't be the first person to have done that. It's your kind of instinct is to hold it down, but it's press and release. Is that everyone who's doing a deputation? Excellent. So I will now...
Chair. I'm also going to be doing a deputation, so if I was going to declare it in the...
of course.
But I shall, since
say
you've
it
called
now.
for deputations, I shall say now I'm going to make a deputation also on 12 Burbage Grove.
Thank you, Councillor Candish.
I'll be excusing myself at 92 Kingston Road as I objected and called it in.
Okay, thank you. think that's all deputation sorted. So finally, introducing everyone else. So basically the council officers. So we'll start over this side.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Morning, I'm Simon Turner, Team Leader in the Planning Department.
Morning, Chair. David Hodges, Head of Development Management.
Good morning. My name's Ben Attrell. I'm a solicitor employed by the council. I'll be advising the committee.
Is there anyone who thinks they should be introduced who I've missed out? I don't think so. I think that's it. Okay, I'll now go to apologies. And I believe apologies have been received from...
Councillor Atwell and Councillor Cordy.
And I know that Councillor Lee Hunt also sent apologies as well. And also I believe... Oh, yeah, Councillor Atwell you've got. That's it. I think that's all I know. Right, now I'll go on to declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest apart from the one that we've kind of highlighted? Councillor Candlish? No? Yes.
The last application that's on the minutes on the agenda is for sorry, I'm just looking up the address. The last application, anyway.
Is that Stanley Avenue?
Yes. I did give some advice at my surgery when a man I didn't know at all, Mr. Middleton, did come in to talk to me. It emerged later on that I do know his brother-in-law from school friend of my son. I don't believe that gives me a prejudicial interest, but I just thought for the sake of openness it was better to explain the situation.
Thank you.
I have asked
Councillors.
for legal advice on that.
Yeah, I was just about to defer for legal advice. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. We did discuss it briefly, and that was my advice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mason.
I have known Mr. Wolfe, who is making a deputation on 12 Burbage Grove, for many years. I do not think that will in any way influence my decision.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is for the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of May. I wasn't at that meeting, so I will need someone to, it's pages 3 to 15 in your pack. If someone who was there would like to propose them and someone else could second, that would be great. Councillor Hugh Mason, proposing?
Yes, I propose.
Chair, I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we now go on to item 4, which is 12 Burbridge Grove, and I will hand over to officers to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have an application at 12 Burbridge Grove for the change of use from a dwelling house class C3 to an 8-bed, 9-person house in multiple occupation, one extra person because one of the rooms would be double occupancy. The application has come to Planning Committee due to the significant numbers of objections and a call-in request from Councillor Candlish. Burbridge Grove is towards the eastern end of Craneswater, towards Eastney. It's the north-south road. And my cursor isn't showing. I'll just get another cursor, see if that works. There we are. It's the north-south road here. It's about halfway up on the eastern side. You can see the beach on to the south, Eastleigh Esplanade. The green areas are the pitch and parts, the cricket, the tennis, and the rose gardens, heading from east to west. And then you have Eastern Parade. Different parking regimes, depending on the road you're in. This area is parking residence zone MG. There's the application site, red-edged on the left-hand side, and aerial photograph from the right-hand side. There's the application property. So it is a detached 5-bedroom house in Craneswater and Eastning Parade Conservation Area, without any external alterations proposed to the public-facing facades of the development. It's a change of use, so the conservation area status has no relevance to the determination of this change of use application. Just to the left-hand side, it has the driveway to the rear garage, which is characteristic of some of the area. Different houses have different width driveways, some of them quite a lot narrower than that. This one is not that wide either. Just highlight that for the moment. And while we're at it, you can just make out that the property has, like other properties, some wonderful large chimneys. These two smaller ones on the northern elevation, there was some mistake with that or misinterpretation of the plans, and so the officer report referred to those as roof lights. A local resident kindly pointed that out to us and asked us, so we've had an amendment to the plan to correctly show those two smaller chimneys and all the others retained on the updated plans. So turning to the first matter, whether or not this application would affect the mix and balance of the local community, excuse me, that's PCS 20 in the local plan and the HMO SPD supplementary document, planning document from 2019. So the tool chosen is the 10% threshold within a 50-metre radius of the application site. There are currently no HMOs within that 50-metre radius, so if approved, this application would provide 1 out of 40 properties, reaching 2.5%. So officers would therefore deem, and your policy would deem, therefore, the effect of the application to maintain a mixed and balanced community in accordance with policy and guidance. Site plan, just to show the driveway down the side and the rear garage shown for bikes. They've got 8 bikes in there. They'd only be required to provide 4, and some refuse store or place for storing the bins. Little change to the elevations resulting, well, from this application. The roof lights at the front, some members may recall from, I think it was last October, a different application which sought to introduce those roof lights to the front, so they're shown for completeness, but they're not part of this application. And similarly, there was a rear extension replacing the rear conservatory type structure with in the same footprint and form to the rear. Existing floor plans, 2-storey house with some roof space. So on the ground floor, we have a kitchen dining space. And then we have 8 bedrooms. So coming in through the front door, generous hall, we've got each room is large and with good size en suites. 3 downstairs. Upstairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 7 bedrooms, each with en suites. Then up into the roof space, using those roof lights I referred to earlier from the previous consent, the 8th bedroom for double occupancy in this instance, and also a second kitchen in the premises. So with respect as to the guidelines as set out in the report, with each bedroom way above the 10 square metres, the communal space can be reduced down from the normal 34 square metres to the alternative of 22.5. In this instance, the combined living space on the ground floor, the kitchen diner would be 24.35, so on its own it meets your standards. And then, as pointed out, there is also the second kitchen upstairs and the laundry room as well, leaving a little more space in the main kitchen for other facilities. So on the pure numerical status, the application meets your guidelines. Many of the rooms are much bigger than they need to be. And in terms of general disposition and layout and outlook, officers are satisfied a good standard of accommodation would be offered for residents. There's a section through the roof. And then we've got various photographs of the existing, some of the inside rooms and the gardens and the exterior of the property. Thank you. I've got deputations in a moment. Some supplementary matters I'll take you through. The first one was the chimney issue and roof lights, so we'll skip through that. Additionally, the second paragraph, following the publication of the officer report, submitted plans have been amended to add a ground floor side-facing window to provide additional light and outlook for the communal living space. I'll just show you that one. So this little window on the south elevation is being popped in just to provide a bit more light and limited outlook looking towards the side boundary there. So we have updated plan drawings for that. Since publication, objections from 15 parties have been received. These are from parties who have already objected and predominantly do not raise new issues material to the decision that haven't already been addressed in the officer report. Materially new points are set out below, however. One of these letters was copied to the members of the Planning Committee. Two of these letters were copied to a smaller selection of councillors, one of those being a member of the Planning Committee, the others not. First new point, the planning history is incomplete and fails to pick up a further refused application at the site. The officer response, the planning history is complete for the site. 2021 refusal, application 21-01804 HOU, was the subject to amendments within the life of the application, which the objector may have misconstrued as a separate application. In any event, this previous refusal permission has little relation to this application, which seeks a change of use. In section 5.2 of the officer report, this is the objector, it states there will be no effect on local highways, and elsewhere it mentions that the MG parking zone is 99% capacity. On top of this, and the huge influx of cars in the summer months, there could be a further 9 vehicles added from the application. The officer response, these are the initial comments of the highways officer referred to, who has considered the impact on the highway network, including parking. As highlighted in the officer report, para 828, the parking standards SPD supplementary planning document sets out that there is no difference in expected car parking provision between a large C3 dwelling of 4 more bedrooms and a large HMO of 4 more bedrooms when both are there. Therefore, there is no policy reason to refuse permission on this matter. The expected provision is equal between now and proposed, and the actual provision would not be changed on site. The next objection point, the report mentions cycle pathing for both 8 and 4 cycle spaces and therefore contradicts itself. Touched on that earlier. The officer's response is the scheme provides cycle parking for 8 spaces within the existing garage. It's big enough to accommodate 8, so they've shown 8 spaces. The expectation in the guidance is for 4 bike spaces, so that is what is required as a minimum by the condition attached. So there's no contradiction. Next objection point, in section 7, the report fails to mention the requirement contained in the HMO SPD for the need to preserve good quality large residential housing stock within the city. The officer response, PCS 20 for mixed and balanced communities and the HMO SPD deal with this matter by setting the 10% threshold on the number of HMOs within a 50-metre radius. That thereby limits the impact of too many HMOs and maintains a large proportion of housing as Class C3 dwelling houses. The policy doesn't say you must retain every large dwelling house as a Class C3. Last objection point, 8.5 of the report states that the council has a 4.97-year housing supply, and because of this, and in the planning officer's view, this application helps to alleviate the 0.03-year shortfall. Is this an out-of-date figure? Request data to demonstrate this, and request that the HMOs, we think those already permitted, be included in the figure. The officer response is the 5-year housing figure is monitored on an annual basis and was last updated just last month. When calculating the housing land supply within the city, HMOs are already included within the calculations. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to deputations now. Mr. Childs and Mr. Wolfe are going to be objecting, and I understand they want to not have an equal split of their time, so it will be 9 and then 3, but a total of the 12. So who is speaking first? Mr. Childs speaking first. And over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Julian Childs, and I live at 9 Burbage Grove. My fellow resident, Paul Wolfe, will address you shortly on more specific issues relating to this application, and I ask only that you consider carefully all the evidence put before you. As you know, this application has been excuse me, highly contentious and has aroused much comment and interest, both from residents of Portsmouth and the press, many of whom are here today. Collectively, I am sure you agree that we all, constituents, members of the committee and the planning department, have a fundamental responsibility to ensure that this application is scrutinised and assessed in a full, fair and transparent manner. Now, I'm told it's not good practice to question the planning department. However, as is clearly evident, there have been multiple instances where the planning department have missed glaring inconsistencies within the application. Many of these were actually only identified by residents and our legal advisor. Judgments have been based on obsolete guidance and regulations, and frankly, have had little or no regard to the Council's own stated policy of maintaining good quality family homes within the city. I'm sure you have all read the detailed and specific objections to this application. That being the case, how can we, or you, the committee, possibly have any faith in the planner's handling of this application? Indeed, your planning officer intimated some time ago, before even issuing his report, that he was minded to approve the application. Only 2 days ago, we had to alert the planners to yet more errors on the submitted plans. Even now, they're glossing over many of the real problems at hand relating to the practicalities of such a conversion, simply ignoring or preferring to kick responsibility for implementation down the line. I therefore strongly urge you, the committee, to take the time to carefully scrutinise all matters arising without fear or favour, and simply not wave this application through on the flawed advice of your planning department. And please, please, don't just accept that everything has been resolved by correspondence. It hasn't. I'll now hand over to Paul. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak against the application. My name is Paul Wolfe. I live at 25 Burbage Grove. I've lived there for 12 years, and I've been actively involved in civic life across the city in various roles, championing culture and the community. I'm here speaking for myself and also on behalf of the large objector group to the application for change of use at 12 Burbage Grove. That house was built and has always been used as a family home. In fact, the owner himself applied for various consents to the house to maintain its use as a family home and has been granted those consents. It's also one of only 3 of its type in Portsmouth, unique and high quality, and it is important for the city to retain this house and similar houses as a part of our family housing stock, failing which we end up with no families in Portsmouth. We fully recognise, though, the pressure that the Council have in observing the national planning frameworks. But the Council also rightly has its own policy to retain and protect family housing and support families in the city. That policy risks being fundamentally eroded by the steady stream of HMO applications in residential streets like Burbage Grove, where larger high-quality homes are limited. Residents of Portsmouth are entitled to have a voice and to have that voice heard. Sadly, the planning system appears to operate in ways that genuine concerns of local residents are washed away amidst a combination of fear shown by the Council to enforce its own policies and a lemming-like drive to honour national guidelines. This combination appears to deny local people the strong voice that they're entitled to. This application, as you've heard, has been controversial at best, and members will have seen the publicity surrounding it. We ask this committee to take full responsibility for interrogating the detail of this application rather than simply relying on the officer's recommendation, which, as members will have seen, has resulted in severe criticism from residents. In the course of my submissions today, you'll hear me use the word irrational. Members will be fully aware of this term, as it is a fundamental requirement of planning decision-making that decisions made are made rationally. Over recent weeks, we've corresponded extensively with both the planning department and executive teams, following a call between our lawyers and the planning officer, where he indicated, as you've heard, before the report was even issued, that he was likely to recommend consent. I questioned the apparent drive to give consent regardless of what was happening and the facts. Unfortunately, our efforts to engage have largely been dismissed. When the report was finally published, we were very disappointed indeed to find that it contained factual errors, false assumptions, and misleading statements. Sadly, this did no more or less than confirm our view that the process is reflected in our communication with officers and the exec team. Our expectation, rightly, is that this committee has seen our mail exchanges, the latest formal objections from residents, and the 3 detailed letters of objection from our legal representatives, all of which highlight the flawed process from the get-go and the weakness in the report. I've got copies here if members want to see them, and I can hand them up if they want to read them. And my view is that members cannot proceed to adjudicate this application unless and until each member has read all of the documentation to appraise themselves of exactly what is being said by us and not just rely on the officer's report. If members have not read everything, I respectfully suggest that this matter be deferred to give everyone time to read and reflect. I give members just two examples of errors in the report. First, the claim that the occupancy by 9 unrelated adults would be no different from a single-family household is frankly illogical, irrational, and self-serving. It ignores lived reality, as all 9 occupants would be adults leading individual lives, and the property will see the footfall of that people network that is associated with these 9 separate individuals. Ignoring reality undermines the basis for proper planning consideration. The conclusion of the planning officer has reached, other than being irrational and illogical, appears to fly in the face of Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, the right to respect for private and family life, home and environment, and the Council's own HMO report of 2019 at page 27, which shows that HMOs receive 18 times the complaints of non-HMOs. A simple Google search reveals significant publicly available information as to issues with HMOs, but nothing of this is referred to by the officer in his report. Members should also note that, perversely, the officer elsewhere in his report seeks to rely on the 2019 report. This again demonstrates the illogical and irrational approach taken. Despite what objectors have said, the officer seeks to assert that he had no evidence before him, and this is a reason that he gives for taking this forward to consent. But this is simply not right. At the very least, the officer has the 2019 report because he relies on it, and the easily available press coverage giving him clear and rational grounds for rejecting the application. Secondly, the report refers to 2 skylights which do not exist. This may be regarded as a small point, but it just shows the care that the officer may have not taken in preparing his report. The planning system is not meant to be adversarial, and I've repeatedly pointed this out to both the planning team and the exec team. But for local residents not to see with their own eyes that a correct and balanced process is in action risks ignoring their democratic rights and their entitlement to rely on executive members and paid officers. This application has gone through 4 sets of revised plans, and even now key drawings are still inaccurate and misleading. Today I don't have enough time to go through each and every one of the objections and point everything out, but I'll just raise 2 things. First, the living space. Members have just been told that there's a kitchen and dining room. This is not true. All parties accept that there is combined living space, and that combined living space is under 34 square metres. Under the 2022 HMO licensing standards, this is in itself a ground for refusing this application. The officers attempt to dismiss the point by reverting to older 2018 guidance via a convoluted interpretation of the 2019 regulations is both irrational and incorrect. It is inappropriate and irrational for the Council to be quoting out-of-date guidance. The 2022 guidance is current and must be applied by members. Second, parking bins and cycle access. The latest plan is misleading. It shows a car fitted snugly against a wall. This is a visual trick, and the officer should know that. The house was built when cars were smaller, but even if a modern car fits, which we doubt when the driveway is measured, the narrow width of the drive means bins and bikes cannot pass safely or practically. This isn't just inconvenient, it's non-compliant, and again, it is of itself a reason to refuse consent. It defies all logic and is irrational to suggest that a family will operate cars, bikes and bins in the same way as 9 separate individuals will. The average family has no more than 2 cars. The tandem parking solution that was reflected on the plan that members just saw, it also defies logic and is irrational. The underlying assumption is false in that it is unlikely that 1 modern car, let alone 2, could actually park in the driveway. No one would block a car in a supermarket car park. So why does the planning officer think it is rational to suggest that 2 cars can tandem park at 12 Burbage Grove? If consent were irrationally granted, there could be up to 9 cars seeking to park, which would lead to risk and danger. I say that to wave these issues through as minor objections is again, frankly, irrational and contrary to council policy. These 2 points alone that I've raised are sufficient to refuse consent. And I urge this committee to take a fair and pragmatic, reasoned approach. And this means turning down the application. The possibility of an appeal by the applicant should not deter the council. Okay? I strongly suggest that what needs to happen is that the committee applies clear local policy, I've finished, common sense and sound planning judgment. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you both for your deputation. I'll now hand over to Councillor Candlish for his deputation.
Thank you very much, Chair. This was an application that I called in and one I've followed from the start. And it was not one that I had planned to make a deputation upon, but unfortunately my ward colleagues could not attend today, so I've stepped in to speak on the many residents who have concerns about this this application, but have not been able to be here today. This application for 12 Burbage Road to be turned into a 9-bed HMO is really an alien concept to the area, and this is evidenced by the complete absence of HMOs in the area currently, at a time when the ward itself, overall, has the 4th highest number of HMOs in the city. This highlights how this application in particular is not in keeping with the area's special status as a conservation area. There are many strands to the concerns that residents have raised, and unfortunately, as I've had to explain to many of them, some of them are not material to planning concerns in the eyes of the law, which this committee, I do understand, is bound to follow. It cannot simply ignore the law as some would like to pretend, simply because on planning the law is often an arse. Indeed, many of these concerns that residents raise are deliberately excluded in laws that were framed to favour the developer over the resident and to encourage the densification of cities like our own. This was a strategy that was started by the last government and is now being reinforced by the current government with the deliberate aim of increasing the number of homes and the people in Portsmouth and to increase the densification of the city. The law has also weakened the ability of this committee in general to resist inappropriate development in the latest NPPF framework by requiring the committee to have not just a clear reason to object, but a strong reason to object, guidance which the government's faraway planning inspectorate often chooses to enforce and award costs if we appeal and lose. But local residents have been so concerned by these plans as to engage their own specialist technical advice on how to try to resist this development within the laws and the policies that are set. And I would urge the committee to consider the technical points that are raised. But as their local councillor, I want to make these residents' human concerns heard. I would therefore like this committee, as the planning guidance requires, to look at the specifics of this case. Not the ridiculous of the law overall, but to fully understand the context in which this specific site sits, and use that in coming to their decision. This property has not been looked after properly for some time, and it is in a very high quality area. Local residents, I'm sure, would have appreciated an appropriate and sympathetic development in line with the conservation area that it sits. However, setting a precedent that committee members should remember, previous applications to develop the site have been turned down as inappropriate and unsuitable. Residents also tell me this speaks to the approach that has been taken about this, developing this whole application. This is a policy-protected conservation area. It needs to retain a historic and consistent feel that helps the whole of Portsmouth and Southsea at a time when the whole of the South Sea seafront is being raised up. Breaking up homes into 8-bedroom bedsits, however fancy, undermines this effect and drip by drip can remove its special character. Residents also worry about parking and vehicle movements. While we all know parking is a challenge across the city and at 99% capacity, despite already being in a residence, an RPZ, a residence parking zone, this also needs consideration. The application cites 2 off-road spaces, but these are only accessible if there are many movements within the cars to enable the car that's on the inside to get out. And the specific location of this property is right in the middle in a row of properties. The coordination of this is made more challenging by the fact that this is not a family. It will be 9 separate individuals who have to organise what their transport would be and who will have friends and relatives who come to visit them. Residents are also concerned about the loss of community they believe they will feel when so many people come in and inevitably out into what is a close-knit and very stable community. We all understand how that means. In this area, people have been living there for 10, 20, even 30 years. In summary, this application goes to the heart of what is wrong with our current planning system. It fails to take account of what local residents care about, and it fundamentally disempowers you, the planning committee, from taking a holistic view and coming to an appropriate decision about the total area. Having sat now where the committee sit, I too have been forced by law to sometimes approve HMOs that I thought were inappropriate and against the wishes of the local residents. However, here, in a recognised conservation area, we have a basis on which to push back and ensure that development is appropriate and protects the special character of the area. To sum up, I would like to remind this committee of the wording it used on the 15th of July 2022 when it rejected a previous application from the site. There, the application, it said, would harm the character of the conservation area and to the residential amenity of the residents. For local residents, that was true then, and it is true now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Candlish. I was going to say, I'm assuming that you are now. I don't know whether. Can I just take advice? Is he allowed to stay in? He just can't take part in the debate.
There's no prejudicial element to this. Is there no personal gain or any gain? And in that respect, you're able to remain if it's just a personal interest, but you're not allowed to vote. That's quite correct.
I'm happy to sit quietly.
Okay. Thank you. So just as this is my first meeting as chair, I just want to remind myself and others that the procedure now is to ask questions on the detail, and there's a lot of issues that have been raised which are probably worth interrogating. And then afterwards we'll go to comments. So are there any questions? Councillor Smythe, I can see you are eager to go, and then I've got...
Chair, thank you, Chair. My question requires us to go back to the picture, very nice picture of the lovely front of the house. If that could be put up, I'd be very grateful. The purpose of a conservation area, of course, is to maintain and to support the physical appearance of the house and of other houses in the road. It is a very pretty road. It's a very nice place to live. I live not too far away and walk around Southsea a lot. Could you first confirm whether any alterations to the front of the building are to be done? I do understand that there's a dormer window going in at the top, which has already been approved. But are there any other changes to the external features of the house?
Now, on the front there, as we showed earlier, the approved roof lights from last year are separate consent. So in this planning application, there's no change to the front of the property.
Good, thank you. And could, apart from being in a conservation area, could we make any further suggestions or informatives about not changing the front of the house in the future? Or is that wouldn't be legal, would it? What?
Correct, you can't go ahead to something else.
So any family could change the front of their house without planning permission if they wanted?
Well, in this particular conservation area, there's an Article 4 direction which does restrict quite severely the changes that could be made to the front of the property. But yeah, this application is for change of use, not alterations to the front of the property.
Yes, and that Article 4 would continue to apply. Does that apply to the front wall and the lovely planting there? I mean, I think in future, just as a question, I do question why we don't ask for pictures of the outdoor space and how it's used. One of the features of these gardens, these houses, is undoubtedly the planted front gardens, and that, of course, is good for the environment. Is there any way in which we can make sure that remains? I know there is concern among neighbours there, because I have spoken to some people about the biodiversity not being challenged by this change of use.
You ask about the Article 4 direction. It doesn't prohibit. What it does is it brings under planning control the following works that would otherwise may not need planning permission: replacement doors and windows on the front elevation, removal, alteration of chimney stacks, alterations to canopies and other architectural details on front elevations, replacement of roof cladding on the main elevation fronting a highway, alteration or demolition of front boundary walls, gates, railings, in this instance fence, painting of previously unpainted external brickwork on the main elevation. None of those are proposed.
And what about the planting? Is that something that a lot of people care very much about, planted front gardens, as I do?
No, that's outside of planning.
As far as we know, are there any proposals to change that? It's not going to be parking or cycle stores or bin stores over that area?
No changes.
Thank you very much. I may have some comments following up on the similar line later on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
I only had one question, but Judith took that as well. It was literally just a question at 6.3, the loss of the front garden. Actually, is there actually confirmed in the planning if that front garden is going to be removed in any form, manner, especially while they do the works, as I'm guessing there'd be scaffolding at the front too?
Well, we wouldn't expect to see an annotation of the existing shrubbery and so on, existing or proposed on the plans, because that's outside of planning control. It's not a tree that I can see there. So the existing owner or any owner along the street could remove their shrubbery and so on, or plant some new shrubbery or other plants. So that's just outside of the application.
So if they wanted to remove all of it and knock down, I believe it's fencing, not wall, and have that as an extra driveway, would they be allowed to do it?
No, I was only talking about the planting. A minute ago, I explained the Article 4 direction controls the,
okay.
the front boundary.
Okay.
Councillor Mason.
I've got one or two questions, Chairman. In a letter from Messrs DMH Stallard on the 19th of December concerning this property, they made a comment about the breach of fire regulations. The distance from the fire escape is greater than that permitted. My first concern is that this would put the kitchen at risk or put people's lives at risk. So could you comment on the allegation that there is a breach of fire regulations in the design of this property?
From recollection, the writer of that letter admitted in the same letter that this was outside of planning control, and he was correct. So there's the building regulations and the licensing standards that will deal with aspects of fire regulations, but it's nothing to do with planning.
Okay, so if that is the case, then any alterations, any modification of this property would require building control.
I wouldn't go that far because I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but internal alterations to an unlisted building, even in a conservation area, do not require planning control.
Right. So this is not a planning matter. The second matter, which has been raised by Mr. Wolf, concerns the 2019 use of the 2019 supplementary planning document, referring back on size of combined and kitchen space to the 2018 regulations and not to the private sector housing space and amenity standards of 2022. Could you advise and sort out this confusion for us?
Thank you. Yes. So in deputations, reference was made to flawed advice and using obsolete guidance. That's an incorrect statement. I'll explain further. I do understand it needs some further explanation. The licensing regime is different to the planning regime. There's no obligation for one to follow the other. The licensing regulations from 2018 were referred to in the planning guidance of 2019 for obvious reasons with respect to room sizes. So in our SPD, the supplementary planning document, we start with the larger communal room sizes, 34 square metres for 6 or more residents, and smaller bedrooms, single bedrooms, 6.51. That same private sector housing 2018 guidance allows for the other balance, which members are entirely used to seeing in the majority of HMOs, which is if all the bedrooms are more than 10 square metres, single bedrooms, 14 for a double, that extra space in all those bedrooms means more recreation space, let's call it, in those individual rooms, and as a corresponding balance, the communal room can be smaller, at 22.5. As I say, those are the guidance that we refer to in our supplementary planning document linking across the private sector housing 2018. Private sector housing have introduced further guidance in 2022 for their own reasons. They have different regulatory guidelines and different matters to consider, some of them overlapping, some not. The planning department is not obliged to follow another department's regulatory regime, and we positively decided not to. That is it.
Right. So to sum up on that, would I be correct in saying that we are correct in using the latest planning sizes, although licensing have different sizes?
So the 2022 licensing guidelines do on the face of it change the situation, but they are still applying flexibility, which is further ahead in the document, pages 9 and 10, I think. They talk in general terms about guidance and flexibility, which makes sense. And indeed, they are licensing the smaller communal space and the larger bedrooms that, on the face of it, on a rigid interpretation or reading of their own guidelines, isn't in there. but they are still licensing and have confirmed to us in email we still apply, this is them talking, this flexibility. The planning department like that flexibility. We think it's a good idea to have the choice of those two scenarios, and that's why we continue to refer quite clearly to their older 2018 guidelines, even though they still apply them quite flexibly now.
Thank you. My next question concerns the alteration at the back of the property, the introduction of, apparently, what I can see, a very sensible introduction of an additional window. Could you advise on the size of that window? Because, as you know, I tend to be rather concerned about light.
I'll give you a by eye estimation, Councillor. Do you mind getting up, Jane, please? Thank you. So I'll make it a bit larger for you. Oh, sorry. That is the east elevation facing down the garden. That is the one window shown down the garden. That's been there in the original plans, and a couple of roof lights to provide a bit more light into that room. This is the side south elevation where we have just belatedly asked for a suggestion of another window there. As to its size, well, it's from approximate waist height to a bit above head height, and it's about, what, 50, 60 centimetres wide, I estimate.
Thank you for that one. My last one concerns the flood liability. Am I right in saying that under the recent flood zone maps, this is in flood zone 1 and not as previously in flood zone 3?
I'm afraid, as you probably discerned from the report, that the flooding matter is a little bit complex because the Environment Agency have updated their national guidelines or flood risk areas, and those show it. This all happened during the course of the application, of course. That took the flood zone down from the higher levels to the lesser flooding level. That came in at the end of March. We've spent some time working with them since to clarify the situation, because the Hampshire authorities have our own strategic flood risk assessment, which shows something different. So we've obviously been extremely keen to make sure we're doing the right thing. And as the report sets out, the Environment Agency do accept the accuracy and the appropriateness of, in Hampshire, the authorities using our strategic flood risk assessment that's of course been agreed previously with the Environment Agency anyway, and they've confirmed that, notwithstanding their changes nationally in March. Nevertheless, our own strategic flood risk assessment does show the area still into the more at-risk location. So that is why the finished floor level is still required by condition to go up by 20 centimetres on the ground floor only.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolf mentioned the width of the driveway and obviously the parking issues with the modern cars and that lot. Has the driveway been actually measured, and will this cause disruption to the neighbours and everything else with the issues of moving cars at early hours of the morning?
We have measured the width of the driveway for completeness. So I'll give that to you. We believe it's about 2.85. It is its narrowest. A standard car is somewhat narrower than that. I don't really want to get into that granularity of detail. What we've tried to make clear is that the policy, the guidance for parking for a large dwelling of this size, 4+ bedrooms, is 2 parking spaces. That's the expected amount. It's not a requirement, it's an expectation. Depends on local circumstances as well. The guidance expectation provision for an HMO of this size with 9 occupants is also 2. So there's the existed provision is neutral, the same, and the provision on site would not change. So there is no change. That's as simplistic and fair way of looking at it, and that therefore accords with your policy, without talking about the details of how wide the drive is, how you manage that with bins and bikes and cars. I take the point about if people are trying to park on the driveway, that might be better organised between family members than other people in a household, an HMO household. I understand that point. This is a sustainable location with buses, services, shops. It's a compact city, etc., etc. So you can't assume that everyone will want to own a car and drive a car. And the residential parking zone is important. This requires a permit if you wish to park there between midday and 1 and 6 and 7. I think I've got that right. And only 3 permits will be provided in this property. We've checked that with highways. The same as for an existing house, up to 3 permits, the same with an HMO. So should this application be approved, and should more than 3 of the residents wish to own a car, they're going to have to decide, those people, whether or not they really want to bring a car into that environment. Because you have to move your car around without a permit between midday and 1 and 6 and 7 every day of the week. Are you really going to be doing that? You can move it onto Eastern Parade. On the southern side of Eastern Parade, that's outside the permit zone. That's 3-hour free parking, but after that, you shouldn't return to the same zone within 4 hours. So I don't really see that people are going to bring too many cars, even if all of them wanted to, because of the difficulty of juggling around, moving around your car, even when you're sitting at home. And lastly, we've been onto site and looked in the area and have noted there is parking capacity in that particular area. The whole zone may be at 99% capacity, which highways have included to us. That's not surprising to the northeast from Kimberley Road, Collins and so on, smaller terraced houses where you are going to get, especially if you've got more than 1 car per household, you're going to have massive demand. But here on Burbridge, we've been there in a midweek, term time evening, when most people are at home, and we've been there even at past 11 o'clock at night when everyone out for the evening may have come home, and we have seen available spaces on Burbridge Grove. So were permits to be issued, 3 permits, people could easily park there. And there's a lot of parking, Brading Avenue at the southern end. We've seen around about 25 spaces easily accommodated on Eastern Parade, Brading Grove, Festing Grove in the evenings. Residents have also said we'd live by the seafront. There can be lots of pressure from summer visitors. I've been out on the sunny summer's afternoon, middle of the afternoon, and the Esplanade, where it's pay and display, absolutely full, people paying to park on the seafront. Eastern Parade on the southern side, the 3 hours free parking, no return within 4, absolutely packed. Then within Zone MG, I saw quite a lot of spaces again. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about refuse. So there's planning, and when you look at it, it looks like there's really good storage. And then there's reality. So I'm just wondering about a potential regular problem, not a one-off, where you've got bins at the back of the house and there's 2 cars parked there. It looks to me that you wouldn't be able to get, because the size of the refuse bins for an HMO is going to be big, because it's the biggest size. If that is an ongoing problem, because there's cars parked there, there is going to be an issue with bins. And I note and I know we're judging this particular application on its own merits, but in another application I think we'll look at today, there was a kind of a compelling argument about how the design of the house had been so that the bins could be brought through the house, because we know that HMOs produce a larger amount of refuse. So whilst I'm pleased to see proper storage, which often is absent, I'm yet to be convinced about the reality of it actually working. So you don't want full bins that can't then be brought out because of the dance of the cars in moving for it to come. I'm not convinced by that.
Yes, I think we said in the report, this is a practical matter that the occupants will have to manage. We don't want to micromanage it for the property. And I take you back to the existing matter, that the site has a relatively narrow driveway. The site is existing if occupied by a family would decide, do they try and squeeze small cars onto the driveway, which would then probably impede bins coming past. If they want to do that, then they'd probably put the bins in the front. And that's the same choice to the HMO occupiers if it's approved.
I'm not quite too sure how that ties up with having adequate bin storage, which we know is an issue that comes up for HMO. So sometimes bin storage is put in and it's not adequate, sometimes it's not, and then you have bins on the front of the house. But I feel that the planning report implies that there is adequate bin storage, which is important for the change of a family house to a sui generis. But I suppose I still am not convinced that that looks good on paper, but in reality it won't work, and that is an issue for me.
Well, it's up to the occupiers to manage, as we say. I repeat myself, if the existing properties, a Class C3 dwelling house had cars parked there, they'd need to put some bins on the front. There wouldn't be 18 bins either.
No, I realise there wouldn't be 18 bins, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the planning, and we can't micromanage, etc. But as it's a material planning issue, that's why I asked the question. But thank you for your answer. Is this another question, or is it? Okay. Councillors, are there any more questions? No, I'll now open it up to comments then. Councillor Small.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I think we can think of a lot of problems with bins that pertain in Southsea. We're a very packed place. Certainly, you know, moving cars, moving bicycles out of the way of passages and everything else is part of the deal. And after all, many people have to bring the bin through their house, which I think this is a much better situation than that. I'm not sure I've ever come across a reason for refusing an HMO that has been about the location of bins either, but I may be wrong. I just wanted to draw attention to, I mean, I fully understand that nobody likes change. I fully understand that people are sometimes worried about change. I fully understand that they're worried about noise, they're worried about the people that might move in, and they sometimes are worried about families that might move in even. But in this case, there seems to be more worry about the nature of the people coming in. Now, that is not a planning matter. And I live in an area where there are very mixed communities, and on the whole, it's not a problem that we come across. I do think that the notion that Councillor Candish said that this is an alien concept to the area. I mean, I'm quite sure some of you have children who live in HMOs when they're at university, when they're away in other places. The HMOs are a crucial part of our housing system. We don't have enough homes for Portsmouth residents in Portsmouth, and the fact that some people can live in HMOs who are genuinely looking to start out their lives with somewhere decent to live, where they feel safe, where they feel the neighbours are being normal, nice people to live nearby and so forth, is an absolutely crucial part of our housing stock. And in this committee, we do see a lot of HMOs where they are in areas where there are too many of them. And I'm very proud of being in a city where we have the 10% rule, and we don't give permission to HMOs when we consider the number of HMOs would overbalance the nature of the area as a mixed and balanced community. Although we do have some where there are areas where historically there have been what even I would consider would be too many HMOs. You know, here you've got somewhere which would be a lovely place for somebody to live. The rooms are very big compared with most of the ones we see. We have rules about the number of people that can live in HMOs and the size rules. None of us have asked questions about the size because these ones are big and are going to be a really pleasant place for somebody to live at a particular stage in their lives. I would like to move approval in accordance with the officer's recommendations. I think the details have been looked at, and I think this would be a really nice place. If I had a child coming to university here, for example, or another child who wanted to start their first job as a professional here, I'd be really happy to bring their luggage down and leave them in this road, whereas there are many places in Portsmouth where I might, as a parent, feel a bit more nervous. And you know, if they're going to learn about putting bins out for each other, then that's part of their life skills that they've got to learn, because everybody needs to do that, and it's part of living in most places in Portsmouth. You have to put your bins out on the front of the street, and you have to bring them back in. So I'd like to recommend that we accept this application, whilst acknowledging the fears that some people seem to have. But I would like to recommend that we approve the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. I note your proposal. I'm just going to open it up to colleagues to make their comments, and if someone was minded to second that. Councillor Mason.
Comment. If we are going down the route of approving this, I think, could we put in a condition that all bin storage must be at the rear? And it has been shown on the plans, but we all know that it's places where it is difficult to bring bins through, and people just leave them in the front forecourts. So can we add that as a condition?
Taking advice.
Could you explain the reason for the condition, please, Chair? Councillor.
To preserve the character of the area, because it is a conservation area, and thing which would, perhaps more than anything else, detract from the conservation areas, to have a set of bins just littering in the front forecourt.
Thank you. Councillor Valley, did you have your hand?
I have to just point out that single people are just as important as families. We're not bad people. We look after where we live. You know, this is kind of discrimination, the way people are talking about concern about how the place looks. Yes, you're living in Clover. How lucky for you. You've got a driveway. You've got a driveway. I'll never have a driveway. You know what I mean? You're so lucky. Share it, please.
I'm taking it personally.
Was that a comment which was related to seconding the
Yes,
proposal?
I'd like to second the motion.
Councillor Simpson.
I actually agree with Julian and Paul, actually. This is a family home and a family road, and that is the conservation in itself. I want to propose to refuse this on 3 reasons. Firstly, the fact that the changes in 2022 was based on the conservation area of keeping it as is. I'm not convinced at all that that front garden is going to stay a front garden. Even though we need permission, I actually think just in the building works it's going to get wrecked. And then once they start moving bins down there, they ain't going to take it back down, especially if there's cars in the way. It's just going to be too much of a hassle. And plus, even if you did put that as a reason for permission, who's going to police it? I mean, who's also going to police all the single adults? I mean, look at the size of this. I mean, have all the people going into these HMOs from singles.com? I mean, come on, it's like this room size has matched requirements for 2 adults. So I'm not convinced. So this would be under PSC 23, conservation of the area, mainly to make sure that we protect the character of the conservation of this area, but also impact of the local character, where we have a 5-bedroom home, which normally have an average of 2 adults, maybe 3 to 4 children, and suddenly we're going to have 9 adults. You know, even if those children turn to adults, it still wouldn't be 9, would it? So that's my proposal for refusal.
Can I just clarify the planning reasons? I just want to clarify the wording of the
Conservation. conservation of the area, the character of the area.
I'd like to second Councillor Simpson's motion.
Yes.
Chair, before going back to the condition, I didn't get another chance to go back to the proposed condition about bins at the back. First of all, I don't know what local habits are on the street where people keep their bins down the backs or in the front gardens, but obviously anyone can do that at any time. So to restrict that flexibility in one property while others maintain that flexibility seems a bit difficult. And then if you were to, just thinking ahead, putting the bins at the back, that would then presumably negate the possibility of parking in the driveway for smaller cars. So I just wanted to point that out.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to add to that, there will be more bins. That's the whole point, really. It's like, yes, the other neighbours can put it in the front, but this front's going to have more bins. And I've actually walked down the street, and it would be really out of character. This proposal is greatly out of character with this area.
So can I just clarify, the bin storage on the plans is at the back, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, bin storage, location to store bins in rather than a structure.
Okay. Are you okay in the with the wording of the proposal for the refusal? Because I just got the PCS 20 character. Do we need to have more detail of that?
Well, I think they're all problematic.
Yeah.
The conservation, the character of the conservation areas are designated for their physical character and appearance, not for who occupies the buildings. So we've established right at the start of this case today that there were no changes to the front of the property, the building, from the change of use proposal. So I don't see how that holds any water. The removal of garden, I've already explained, is outside of planning control. There are no trees involved. And then I think the third reason was room sizes. These rooms are significantly above the minimum sizes. So I think all of those are problematic.
I recommend we use the same refusal from 15th of July in 2022, harm to character of the conservation area into residential amenity to neighbours.
But that was to do with windows, was it not? I'm just trying to make sure that we stick to planning reasons.
Well, I mean, it does. I mean, you know, PCS 23 does talk about conservation. So it's very specific to, you know, and it mentions in the PCS 23 about local character. And if you're having an HMO in an area, that is changing the local character, isn't it?
No, it's to do with building. That's what I'm trying to work out. Because so before it was refused because of the proposal around the lights and significant lights, which did all sorts of whizzy things from what I can understand. And so the conservation has to be related to the building. So we would need a reason to refuse it based on, if you're going to use the conservation.
I fully appreciate that, Chair, but that's my proposal.
Okay, all right. Can I take some advice from planning about if those reasons are not planning reasons, can we just go ahead with that proposal?
You can decide to do as you wish, but
Okay.
of course, if you're acting against officer advice and with reasons that are not likely to be upheld, then there's a real danger of appeal and successful appeal and an award of costs.
Chair, yeah, just to emphasise the point, it's an application for the use of the property. The conservation area we're dealing with physical alterations and the built character, as Mr. Turner has said. So remember, we're dealing with the use of the building. We suggest immense caution in having a conservation area reason for refusal.
Thank you. So I'll go to the first proposal, which was to support officers' recommendations by Councillor Smythe and seconded by Councillor Vallely. All those in favour?
Chairman, does this include my suggestion that the bins should be stored at the back?
Thank you
and that
for
be written in?
Thank you for reminding me, Councillor. I suggest that we do. I'm looking to the proposer. I suggest that we do.
The key thing is that we put should be stored.
Yeah.
Because everybody has to put their bins out in front on bin day, and somebody might be away 24 hours and not be able to deal with it. And of course, it would cause all sorts of difficulties if other people's habits. If you're elderly living in a house like that, you might well not be able to have to wait for your carer to come to bring the bin in or something like that. So I would be happy with that, but I certainly support the motion.
So the proposal with the bin comments, all those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? Okay. I think I'll leave it there because the numbers work out anyway. So so that's the end of that item. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone doing the deputations. Do I have to? Does the officer have to say it out?
Beneficial to confirm what's happened.
Sorry, I forgot to make sure that the officer had actually said what the outcome was.
It's normally you, Chair, but I can say it if you like. So planning permission has been granted with the extra condition concerning the bins.
I think some extra people have arrived, so if you're staying for the entirety of the meeting, do you want to introduce yourself? We'll just wait a couple of minutes. Councillor Sanders.
Yes, Chairwoman.
Welcome to the meeting.
Good morning.
And you are here.
I'm going to make a deputation about 180 Stride Avenue, and then I shall leave the premises.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. I'm here to support 58 Stanley Avenue.
Welcome. Thank you. And you are?
I'm Councillor Kadir.
Welcome. Okay, so we go on to the next item, which is 92 Kingston Road. And as Councillor Simpson has said, he was going to leave the room for this one, so that's why he's gone. So we have, I'll hand over to council officers to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at 92 Kingston Road for the change of use from a dwelling to a 9-person, 9-bedroom house of multiple occupancy with a single-storey rear/side extension following the demolition of an existing conservatory and external alterations to the front facade to include new windows and doors. This application has come to Planning Committee because of the number of objections and the call-in request from Councillor Simpson. I'll go straight to the Supplementary Matters Report, the SMAT. We reported 18 objections. Actually, there were 15. We had some duplications of addresses and so on. So there were 15 objections to support and the call-in. That's the SMAT dealt with. So we're on the Kingston Road, heading north from the centre of the city, on the eastern side, in the middle of what was a local parade of shops. So it's the property with the brown shop front still. So although it looks like a shop and has commercial premises on either side, we have checked the council tax records and Street View as well. and we can see it's been in residential use for some years now. So just to confirm, it is an existing dwelling house, hence the application to change of use from dwelling house to an HMO. Turning to the first principal issue for the mixed and balanced community, there are 4 existing HMOs, which you can make out with the red triangles. I'll just get the pointer up. So 1 to the southwest on the other side of the road, and 3 on the side road, and the application site is at the centre. So if approved, it would be 5 out of 109 properties. That's 4.58, so it's still well below the 10% threshold for a mixed and balanced community. Moving on to the alterations, I'll just remind you of what the property looks like at the moment. This shop front would be removed. They would brick up the current door and introduce new brick and window and new door to the front. And while I'm at it, if you observe the upper storey bay window matching next door, and I think another 1 or 2 in the same terrace, an extra floor is proposed to go inside the property, which involves cutting across, changing some of the existing levels. These are obviously high Victorian ceilings on the ground and first floor, you can see. Although the floors would cut just about the windows, I'll show you in a moment the sections which show how it is still, in officer's opinion, perfectly acceptable without external effects on the character of the building, and indeed we support the retention of the bay window to match the others. So back to the front of the property, that's on the right hand side there, that is the existing door that will be filled in, and then on the left a new window and doorway. The rear, the removal of the large conservatory running down the light well, replaced with this much smaller extension, and then permitted development roof extensions. That's the existing property. You can just about see the recessed shop front door there, and the rear conservatory along the side that will be removed, and 3 storeys. Moving on here, we have the additional floor, making use of the height of floor to ceiling height in the Victorian building, and then the roof extension to achieve 4 storeys internally. The communal living space is at 34.54, well above the 22.5. At the rear there, access to the back garden as well. And then otherwise we have 9 ensuite bedrooms, all of which meet the required standard. So through the house, a bedroom at the front here with an ensuite, 3 bedrooms on the first floor with ensuites, the second floor and the top floor. And then we have a secondary kitchen on the top floor, not required, but there as an additional facility for the occupiers. Here are the internal divisions. Quite a lot of work. I think the property has already had a lot of internal work done. It would be considerably gutted, if not totally, obviously, for the rearrangements. Here are some of the details. So the new lower floor in the roof space will be set back from the window. I don't think you'd see that at all. Set back behind with reflection and height and angle. And also within the bay window, again, set back, not projecting into the bay. So absolutely no difficulty there with the appearance. So in summary, with a mixed and balanced community maintained and a perfectly acceptable standard of accommodation, officers were able to recommend approval, notwithstanding the objections.
Thank you so much for that report. So we have 3 deputations here. One is, and the first one is an objection from Jacob Short. So over to you, Jacob.
Thank you. I believe that's, I don't think Councillor Simpson's speaking, so I think it's only 2, but I'll make a start. Good morning. My name is Jacob Short. I'm a community campaigner in Fratton, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and to Councillor Russell Simpson for calling this in. I'm here to give a deputation on behalf of many concerned local residents, as well as myself, regarding the proposed change of use at 92 Kingston Road, from a high street property, what looks to be a single dwelling, to a 9-bed HMO. While I absolutely recognise the need for more housing, this particular proposal raises a number of concerns for the local community. First, let's talk about parking. This area already suffers from a significant shortage of available spaces. The council's own transport department has noted that off-street parking isn't possible at this site, and that with the increasing number of bedrooms could well lead to more cars competing for spaces. And we could be looking at 9 additional vehicles, or more if you include visitors and work vans, further impacting roads like Toronto Road, Binstead Road, St Stephen's Road, Balliol Road and other surrounding streets, which are already congested and under review for a potential RPZ. Although the plan includes storage for 4 bicycles, it's unlikely to meaningfully offset the increased pressure on parking. In addition to this, the bus service improvement plan is proposing a bus lane between Binstead Road and Hanway Road, removing 19 limited waiting parking spots down Kingston Road, reducing the areas for work and removal vans to park, creating further issues for current residents, as well as the loss of a cycle lane when discussing the alternative of bicycles. Second, we must consider infrastructure. The local sewage system is ageing and already under considerable strain. Accommodating 9 people in one house seems excessive for a property of this type, and it risks putting further pressure on services that are already at breaking point. There's also the matter of affordable housing. This could be a decent-sized family home, exactly the sort of property that could help meet local demand for couples and families. Converting it into a larger HMO and letting rooms at market rate effectively removes it from that pool, pushing it further out of reach for many local people, also impacting local schools that are suffering with a lack of intake. Another point of concern is the shared facilities. 1 washing machine and 1 dryer for up to 10 people, plus visitors, is simply not enough. It may not breach the regulations, but it's easy to imagine the machines being in constant use, creating noise and disturbance both within the property and for neighbouring residents. Furthermore, the application doesn't make it clear where the cycle storage will actually be located. That matters. Without knowing where it will go, it's hard to assess whether it could obstruct access, create fire hazards, or reduce usable outdoor space. And finally, I want to raise the broader issues of community impact. Local GP surgeries and dentists are already under pressure. Residents frequently talk about the difficulties of getting an appointment. Increasing the population density through developments like this only adds to the strain. I looked at the 2019 local plan, and the policy requires that at least 65% of the primary frontage is in retail A1 use. Although this property has been used as a single dwelling, the development and planning retail background has shown the retail occupancy in the North End District Centre has been steadily declining in recent years, reaching a low of 54.2% in 2017 before recovering to 63.9% at the time of the survey in 2018, bringing the 3-year average to 59.2%. Why increase the amount of residential properties in the district when the retail presence is already struggling? The document includes the vision which states it is to become a successful commercial and employment centre and valued meetings place for the local community, set within an improved environment for all. Even the pre-submission of the new plan at section 7.14, town centres, highlights the importance of high streets, saying high streets are hubs for economic, social and cultural activity, and that local neighbourhood centres provide an essential, accessible network of shops, services and facilities for the city's communities. Again, how can we fulfil this modern goal if we convert more of these units into large HMOs? This deputation isn't about saying no to housing, it's about asking for developers and developments that are balanced, appropriate and sustainable. I hope you'll all take these points into consideration when reviewing this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jacob, and also for pointing out that, yes, I'd crossed Russell off my list and then looked and saw there was 3, so thank you for that clarification. Over to Carrie-Anne, speaking in favour.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today, and welcome to the Planning Committee, Susie. Okay, at Apical, we could not be more passionate about providing our clients with high-end, fully compliant, well-designed shared living spaces. We have designed many HMOs in Portsmouth and surrounding areas, and our designs have never been subject to refusal of a HMO licence. We ensure all of our designs are fully compliant with planning, building control and HMO licensing, and we work hard to ensure we stay at the forefront of any changes to legislation to ensure our client has the best possible experience with us and is left with a great designed shared living home to give tenants the best possible living experience whilst being compliant with the relevant regimes. It's becoming more and more apparent that many landlords are exiting the rental sector and smaller HMOs are becoming less viable due to rising utility costs and the more recent additional licensing scheme. This has led to many landlords who are either unwilling or unable to do the works in order to be compliant with the new licensing scheme, selling their smaller HMOs or switching back to family lets. This in turn places a greater need for the growing market in larger HMOs which have been fully renovated and provide high-end, energy-efficient living with spacious bedrooms and well-designed communal areas, whilst ensuring the smaller properties return to family use. 92 Kingston Road is a property that is in extremely poor condition and is in need of renovation. The owner will be carrying out a full refurbishment back to brick renovation, upgrading all of the walls and floors to increase the thermal and sound efficiency for both the comfort of the residents and that of the neighbours. There will also be solar panels on this property which will allow the owner to offer cheaper utility costs. The property is to be let to employees of BAE Systems and will be professionally managed by Applecore. As stated in the officer report, the rear conservatory will be removed to provide a small outdoor amenity area, and a large side conservatory will be removed and replaced with a much smaller side extension. This will improve the light and amenity provision for both the future occupiers and that of the neighbouring properties. There has been a minor change to the front elevation to align the front door with the rear door, and this was made at the request of the planning officer to make the storing of the bins and cycles easier for the tenants, providing a direct route through the property. We had initially suggested setting in the front of the building to allow for a purpose-built bin store with green roof. However, the officer felt the change of internal layout was more favourable. All bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area for 7 persons when all bedrooms meet this 10 square metres is 22.5, and this property provides 34.5 of communal kitchen living on the ground floor, with an additional kitchen and dining provision of 11.6 on the top floor, giving a combined total communal area of 46.1 square metres, which is far in excess of requirement. All of the bedrooms also benefit from an ensuite. With community provision of this level, I think it's important to know that the bedrooms could all be 7.5 square metres and would still be fully compliant with policy. However, the property owner wanted to ensure the 10 square metre standard was met across all rooms. We were also proposing a cycle store within the rear garden and then the ease of access through the building to enable this. I wanted to pick up on a couple of things that Jacob brought up. So he said about the 2 washers and dryers. There will be 4 washers and dryers in this property. They'll be stacked on top of each other. For that amount of people in the property, they would need more than 1 each. Sewage, Southern Water have a responsibility to ensure sufficient sewage capability, and this reason for refusal has been overturned by appeal previously. And then finally, the C3 family home loss. This is a C3 property. There's no loss of retail. It's an existing lawful C3 property. And I wanted to just stress that this has been on the property market for a considerable amount of time before the owner purchased this property and didn't sell because of the significant works required. So it's likely to remain empty for a significant period if he wasn't doing these works. Another point I wanted to bring up that may or may not be relevant to this with the communal areas, the licensing standard query that was brought up by a previous deputy. So the new licensing document doesn't refer to reduced communal area standard for the larger bedroom sizes. However, I have been in talks with Samuel Rickard, the housing regulation manager at licensing, a number of times over this point. So I have it in writing that this was an error that was not put in the new document, but they are still continuing to apply those standards because they want to encourage those standards. My worry is if they did not do this, you would then see increased bedrooms numbers at 7.5 and 6.5 square metres and increased occupancy. So to give you an example, a 7-bed family home that we generally do could be a 9-bed if you would turn people away from the increased bedroom standards. The reduction of communal area encouraged developers now to provide larger bedrooms, which is what tenants want, and to move away from this would be a backward step for PCC. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne. Okay, members, questions, if there are any. Councillor Smythe?
I've just sort of got a question about the number of doors in the property. And I can't understand the... If you could show us the layout plans, please. We do often have discussions about corridors and not measuring corridors as part of usable space. I don't want to get onto that. This avoids this. But there are actually 2 doors on the first floor, second floor and third floor, I gather the one with the key is actually the room's front door, but you've still got a... I think it's a waste of space, and I can't see the reason for it. Is it something to do with access to... Yeah. Please, could we have some reason why that those three areas on those three floors are pinning people behind two doors?
I assume it's fire regulations, but that's only my assumption. The applicant's agent may be able to answer if you would like to ask.
Would you be able to answer that, Carrie-Anne? It's fire regulations. You happy with that, Councillor Smythe?
I mean, I'm glad it's for some reason. I just couldn't work it out. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Mason.
Is there rear access to this site?
I don't believe so, Councillor.
Thank you.
Comment, this is another reason for having the site on these applications on some plan somewhere, rather than just the shape of the building.
Point taken. If there's no other... You've got a question, Councillor Candos.
Can we also go back to the picture where we saw the windows cutting into the height of the room? So in squeezing, I just want to confirm, I think the door is a normal height and therefore the ceiling is a normal height. We haven't reduced ceiling heights inappropriately.
I don't have the change from the existing to the proposed, but undoubtedly those ceiling heights will match building regulations or exceed them. Yeah, there's the broader cross-section, but that's just showing the same detail. This is the detail of that. Whoops.
You happy with that, Councillor Cantos?
I realise it's clearly put on the left-hand side of the thing. I had missed that.
Okay. Any other questions before we move to comments? No. Comments? Councillor Mason.
I hear what the deputy said concerning the character of the area and the need for family homes, but there is a great need for HMOs. One only has to speak to agents for HMOs to realise that there is this very high need. I think this is a suitable building for that need, and I think the way in which it has been reorganised inside is suitable. It's difficult to think what the alternative would be, which would be effective in upgrading a property other than having it as an HMO. So I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Is there anyone who either wants to comment or to second that proposal? Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll go to a vote then. So the proposal to accept officers' recommendations by Councillor Hugh Mason, seconded by Councillor Smythe. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? One abstention. So that is clearly carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Should we push on? So the next item 6, is 180 Stride Avenue. So I'll hand over to officers to present.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an application for the change of use of a C3 dwelling house at 180 Stride Avenue to a mixed use within Class C3 or C4, sorry, a flexible use, not a mixed use, a flexible use within Class C3 or C4, so that means they can change back between the Class C3 and C4 for a period of 10 years. So location of the site, so bottom right is Eastern Road, Stride Avenue directly links on to the Eastern Road there, and this is a corner plot, a semi-detached property that you see on the left-hand side there. So the property is probably originally Edwardian and then was extended from the planning history in the 90s with a two-storey extension. So it already has accommodation in the roof space with a dormer on the rear and is an existing 4-bed property. So in terms of the mix and balance communities assessment, you'll see we've identified a single HMO within the 50-metre radius. So that's, with this approval, that will bring us to 2 out of 51 properties, so 3.9%. So we're still below the 10% level in the adopted guidance. So this is property as existing. As you can see, it's been previously extended, as shown top right, you can see there's an existing rear dormer. Moving on just to the existing floor plan, you can see the garages to the side there, that will be converted as part of the proposals, but also just to highlight that it already has accommodation within the roof space. And so proposals, the alterations to the building don't require planning permission, so there's a number of aspects to this. The dormer at the rear will be enlarged to accommodate an ensuite for the bedroom in the roof. The rear conservatory just below will be sort of built up as a masonry structure rather than its rather less than adequate appearance at the moment. And then to the front elevation on the left-hand side, the existing door and garage door will be removed and replaced by a window. In terms of what it'll mean for layout, it's the HMO. So you can see we have 2 bedrooms to the ground floor, 1 ensuite. The bedroom 1 will share a bathroom upstairs with bedroom 3. There's also a downstairs WC for their benefit as well. Communal kitchen diner set behind that. Moving up to first floor, we've got 3 bedrooms, so 2 with ensuites and then an additional bathroom. And then in the loft space, so bedroom 6 with its own ensuite. There's a really minor change to the proposals in the layout. So initially the cycle store was shown to the front. We felt that was probably not ideal as a security risk. Also, it would sit right in front of the occupier of the converted garage bedroom and particularly not a great outlook, looking straight onto the bike store. So that's been moved into the rear where it will be much more secure, but also we're conscious that there's a reasonable route through the property that you can see on the right-hand side for anyone using the cycle store to be able to take a bike through the building. Just some final views, the existing property as is, what's in terms of its current lawful use as a C3 dwelling house. Just going to the supplementary matters. So yes, as noted in the supplementary matters, the cycle store has been relocated to the rear. So we've tweaked the plans. So that's condition 2 related to the plan numbers and condition 4 for the plan numbers for implementing the alterations to the building, and just to confirm the point that it would be for a flexible use between C3 and C4, and the alterations don't require planning permission, and as noted in the report, there's no condition restricting the conversion of the garage. Having looked at the scheme and considered it against our adopted guidance and policies, we're content to recommend it for approval.
Thank you so much for that. We have two deputations. So the first one is Paul Beach, who's the applicant. Do you want to? You have 6 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, so the application we've put forward is we plan to use it for high-end professional use HMOs, predominantly people that are working in the city. It's on a good bus route. There is parking in the area, but it is on a good bus route. The property has previously been adapted by the previous owners. It was used as supported housing. It contains a compliant, fully wired L1 fire alarm. All the doors are currently fire doors with door closers on them, and it was used by 4 individuals. So we're only increasing the occupation to the area by 2. It wasn't a family home. We're not changing it from a family home into. It's always been used as, or since the adaptations were done many years ago, it's always been used for individual accommodation, which is basically what we want to continue to use it as, but as a licensing under a HMO application.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Councillor Sanders.
Susie, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I don't normally start with processes. However, it's important, as we've seen from earlier, that contentious planning decisions are decided by people Portsmouth residents can sack. That's why the former leader and current Lord Mayor ensured that HMOs, which we know is contentious, to put it mildly, are decided by you. Were betide, the person or party that cancels that. I have to declare a mild interest, as the developer has said. This is a former property. It's one of the few Clarion housing properties in this city they didn't want to sell to the council housing team I oversee. I know how happy former Clarion tenants are to have the council as their landlord, and frankly, we'd have loved to have had this as well. That makes this choice doubly sad. My first point is one I make every time I'm here because I'm amazed it still happens. This developer, like so many others, uses legal permitted development to deliver the structures required for a HMO, and only then puts in an application. Given how little trust there is with HMOs, as we saw with Burbage Grove earlier on, this seems a spectacular own goal. It means for people like me, do we oppose every loft extension because it might lead to a HMO? That is stupid. But these tactics make that increasingly likely. I know that is a point that in recent interviews that Councillor Simpson and I have done, he agrees with as well. He's called one of the most anti-HMO voices in the city. I think I know how he might vote on this one. But it is a real issue, and it is a real problem in terms of trying to generate or trying to reduce the community tensions that exist across the city as far as HMOs are concerned. I have to say I'm also amazed at the interest people in Hilsea Ward have in the scheme. I don't see it when I have to say it comes to pavement parking in Cedar Grove, which isn't very far from this site, nor in HMOs in Milton Road or St Pirates Avenue, where I've addressed this committee before. Many of their valid concerns, I have read all the comments, are policy issues best dealt with elsewhere. I'm sure they weren't whipped up to object, but you never know. So to the scheme at hand, and my first concern is parking. It's not quite right, as the officers say, to say the transport people don't raise an objection. The planners say, quote, given the constraints of the site, no off-street parking can be accommodated within the curtilage of the property. As the provision of bedrooms would increase, there is potential for increased instances of vehicle driving around for spaces, unquote. That could raise an amenity issue for you to decide. That is what they say. That's not no, but it's not yes either. And that matters because, could you, sir, hello you, yes, could you just bring up the photograph of the site, please? Simon or your colleague, could you just bring up the photograph of the site, please? Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Now you'll see towards the left-hand side, those are council flats. They have people in those flats have objected to this particular scheme for various reasons. But you'll also see it's not just the garage, it's the parking space in front of the garage. Both of those things will be lost under these proposals. A garage used as a bedroom is a bit interesting, but I understand in 1997 that was absolutely fine. I personally regard it as a bit stupid, but there we go. But there was no change of use then. Now there is, and as you can see, with both the garage being converted to housing and obviously the parking space in front being lost, there's a significant reduce of parking space and more vehicles. And that raises precisely the amenity issues the transport people say you could judge. I have to say I'm impressed that people think the 13 and 14 bus route is a good one. The only complaints I got, not least yesterday, were around how it should be improved and how it is not good enough. But that's something I know that Councillor Candlish and the rest of the team are working on. So my second point is inconsistency. And again, this comes back to amenity. Paragraph 8.35 of the report says there will only be minor work. Yet paragraph 3.4 talks of extensive remodelling of the site. Now, you can have one, you can have the other, but you can't have both. And I believe that latter, particularly through what is going to happen with this photograph kindly put up by the officers in front of us, will affect the amenity of neighbours, including the council properties to the rear, to the left-hand side. The developer actually knows this, and that's why there's going to be new insulation in the garage and elsewhere. It's not clear whether that's been independently tested or what redress neighbours will have if it fails. And if it does fail, that will affect their amenity. I also believe the developer is slightly inconsistent in what they've said the property will be. They want the flexibility of a change of use. That's perfectly understandable. On the application form, when asked, does your proposal include the gain, loss or change of use of residential units, the answer is no. While paragraph 313 of the design and access statement says the developer seeks a 6-bed HMO. In my judgment, it can't be both. It's either one or it's the other. Again, I believe that because of this inconsistency, you should refuse this scheme. However, if you don't, then can I respectfully suggest that to allow the moving of the cycle storage, I suggest altering the revision of condition 4, which is in your supplementary matters document, from prior to first occupation of the premises as a HMO, because that's got to go through various processes, to prior to the completion of the works, as it's the works that's the issue, not the tenure. I certainly have no idea how my Lib Dem colleagues will vote on these things today, because we don't talk about these things. But I do hope you do refuse it today and help the amenity of local residents, not least the council tenants whose flats I oversee to the left. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Okay, over to questions, first of all. Any questions? Councillor Mason.
Question which I asked the officers to sort out yesterday, the fenestration on what used to be the garage. It appears from the slide which you showed that the window is half bricked up. Is that the case?
Great, we've got what do you mean? I'm not sure I quite understand. Apologies, Chair.
The left-hand side, northeast elevation as proposed, immediately above your dot, there is what appears to be a very small window with brickwork where one would expect the top of the window. The fenestration just doesn't fit if that is brickwork.
Okay, I see what you mean. As set out in the presentation, the works to install the window don't need planning permission, so we're dealing with the use of the property. They need to comply with building regs. There's a set size of opening that you need to have under building regs to provide enough sufficient light relative to the floor space. So the smaller the building, smaller the window you can have, bigger the building, bigger the room, the bigger the window that you need to have. So they would need to comply with that as well. But in terms of what we're considering today, we're considering the use of the property, Chair.
Are you happy with that answer?
No, I just want to know whether that northeast elevation shown in that window would appear to be a little square and to be smaller than the one above it on the first floor.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
It is smaller?
Yes, that's correct, Chair, yeah.
On a design matter, I don't like that. I will have to think about that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I just have a question around the the loss of park. I'm trying to work out from the picture whether that front bit, which will now be subsumed in the buildings works, what in terms of parking loss, was it 1 or 2 cars that could have been?
My colleagues have been looking on the available evidence, and it appears that a very small car could just about get on the front drive without poking over the pavement. There's no evidence of it's difficult to know if a garage is ever in use. The width of that garage door wouldn't lend itself easily to be even built when it was. But just to emphasise the points in the report that the parking standard for the 6-bed HMO at 2 spaces is the same as the 4-bed house. So in terms of a parking demand and then potential pressure in the area, that would be the same under our standards, Chair.
Thank you for that information. Any other questions? Councillor Smythe.
I've got a question about, following on from Councillor Mason's question. If what you said was that the windows aren't a matter for this application, which is to do with change of use, but that window, that as shown on the ground floor of where bedroom 2 is, looks to me like it's potentially kind of not going to give enough light for that room. And surely if that is a concern, then it's a concern that would stop us having bedroom 2 as a bedroom. It would have to be some sort of storage room or something else. I mean, could you give us any satisfaction about... I mean, not only does it look too small from outside, which I can see might not be something we can look up with a change of use, but is it going to... It's a wasted opportunity not to have a lovely light room there.
Can I separate out those 2 things? Because I had a question. One is, I'm wondering whether the drawing is not reflecting, because sometimes with these, sorry.
The elevation.
I'm wondering whether the drawing is not reflecting the planned window. Is it possible to go to the
I think that's
applicant and
correct,
double
because-
check that?
Well, I think it's a really good question.
Yeah.
Because actually, if you look at
I'm
these-
just asking the applicant who's behind us.
Yes, you are quite right, Chair. I'm with my architect and I've just asked him the same question. Why didn't we draw it the same as the window above? The window will be the same as the window above with a fan light at the top.
Thank you for that clarification. I imagine that that's what's happened. So it's the drawing that's wrong, so it will match the window above. I suppose...
Well, hang on. On the... Sorry, Chair, but on the plan, the first floor window is smaller, shown as smaller as the ground floor, so we have to be a bit more specific about that. We don't want 2 small windows. But you're right about it. But the first floor as proposed shows on the plan a narrower window than the ground floor as proposed. So yes, thanks to the applicant for wanting them the same, but let's have the same bigger, please.
Chair, if I can help. So the first floor window's unchanged. If members were specifically concerned about that window, there's a number of ways we could do. We could attach a condition to require that, or we could delegate approval to the Assistant Director to approve the scheme subject to a plan amending that window to be the same size.
Thank you for that clarification. Is that useful?
It does. And I appreciate, but I mean, the more light we can have into both of those bedrooms, the better. And if we're going to 2 small windows, which are going to look very much at odds with the bay window, then I'm not any happier than I was before. So if we could condition that, that would be great.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Both of you. Councillor Mason just got in before you, Councillor Smythe. I'll come back to you.
Again, coming back to bedroom 2 and bedroom 5. Bedroom 2, which is the ground floor, has upgraded side insulation. But bedroom 5, which would appear to have same type of walls, does not have that. Is bedroom 5 also going to be insulated?
That would not be a planning matter, Chair. I mean, that would be a matter for building regs when they came to do the works. of whether the insulation is adequate. So can't answer that, but it's a matter for building regs.
Okay.
Councillor Smythe.
Is there an opportunity to put on any sort of condition to depave the front of the building there? At the moment, we've got a rather ugly parking space. It's not quite a parking space. If we can go out and look at the photograph, please. Now, this corner property could be quite attractive if there were perhaps a tree or some planting. And certainly that horrible paving was taken away and some of the area was at least made permeable, which is what we're all trying to aim for with the outdoor environment in Portsmouth, so we're not just pouring water away down the drains. Can we put a condition on about landscaping that part? I think it would be greatly to the benefit of residents and to local residents in the area.
Chair, so if you look at the right-hand side plan, that's indicated there as amendments to that rather harsh-looking front driveway to do that. So conditions to agree the planting on that would be something reasonable to do.
Actually a condition in the recommendation here?
No, I mean, it's a very small area. So it's the test for a condition is the application unacceptable without it, bearing in mind the existing appearance. We're not changing that. So, but there's a potential planning gain, isn't there, from doing that? So we can support a condition to deliver that.
Yes, Chair, I would, if we get on to comments, I would like to recommend a condition on landscaping and depaving in that area, please.
Any other questions? Going into comments. Councillor Simpson.
I was going to say it before, but I thought I'll wait for comments. I, like all the committee members here, treat each application on its own individual merit. I find it very childish and churlish to mention committee members and deputations, Councillor Sanders, but in the future, Chair, I think if other councillors are mentioned in deputations, I think it should be picked up. Thank you.
Point taken. Any other comments? Councillor Candlish.
I would support, to the extent that we can, the comment that Councillor Smythe has made around the depaving. And I think even if it is not something that we can mandate, I know the applicant is in the room and the sentiment, I think, is very clear. And I think this is something that the committee, I would like to kind of put on the public record that the committee is generally very favourable towards thinking along these lines, as it follows a lot of the things the council is also trying to do to depave wherever possible, to reduce the pressure on sewage pipes and ultimately, therefore, to reduce discharges into our watercourses. So I think this is a really good opportunity, and I would like to, I will be supporting Councillor Smythe's suggested condition to the, if they can find some language that will enable us to do so.
Thank you. Was that a way of making a proposal?
I'm happy. I wasn't clear. I don't think we'd got to that point yet, so I thought we were simply on comments.
No, I just could see that the comments were drying up, and so I wondered whether your comment would you be happy to?
Prompted by the chair, I am happy to support the officer's recommendation with the addition of the condition as described by Councillor Smythe.
Thank you.
The condition is that we delegate to officers the responsibility for ensuring that there is some landscaping there and depaving where possible in order to enhance the amenity of the area and of the property itself.
Thank you. For those words sufficient?
Yes. It's very straightforward, a landscaping condition. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Chair, just to be sure that and clear that also includes the issue around the window.
Yeah, I was about to add that in just to say. So I think we need to. So can we just? I just want to check that we've got clear that the drawings are wrong and the window is the same size as the one above it. And we would build that into the recommendations to make sure that's clarified, even though we've had a verbal confirmation of that. Okay. Had you seconded it then? Yes. Okay. So, looks like we have a proposal from Councillor Canlish, seconded by Councillor Smythe, with the conditions around planting, depaving, as stated eloquently by Councillor Smythe, and also a clarification that the window is the same size as the one above it.
If I could just make a very short observation here. This property could be kind of very good for one or two people who need to use wheelchairs, it seems to me. And I don't think we can condition for that, but that's just an observation, particularly as one could use a small part of that landscaped area as somewhere that with the proper security, a personal mobility scooter could be kept, which is very rare.
Yes, good observation. Okay, so we'll go to voting. All those in favour of the proposal? All those against? And abstentions? Thank you very much. So that is carried, and the officer's recommendations will proceed. Thank you. Thank you for your deputations as well. Right. Does anyone need a comfort break? Should we have a 5-minute comfort break? Or do we want to push on? I think 2 people definitely want a comfort break. So 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, so agenda item 7, 275 Laburnum Grove. I'm going to hand over to the officers to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is an application at 275 Laburnum Grove for a certificate of lawful development for a proposed use to increase the occupancy of this existing HMO by one additional person. So here's the site there. It's mid-terrace property, midway through Laburnum Grove. Chair, for your benefit, previous application members made a site visit too, which you'll see in this planning history. So some of the members have been in the building to see it previously. So yes, you see the property there, mid-terrace property, and the frontage there, one of these unusual, has these unusual ceramic bricks to the front. So this is the existing building as it's been extended and altered to become a HMO, and just looking at the floor plans. Effectively, what we're being asked is a material change of use. Is this room that on the left-hand side that's shown as or indicated as a gym, there is used as a bedroom. As you'll be able to see from the photos in a minute, it's actually furnished and laid out as a bedroom, but it's not currently let. And we're advised by licensing that they have license of property for 7 occupiers. And so just taking through the pictures of the property, so top left is the rear garden, so there's a rear sitting out space and storage shed with bikes, the communal kitchen and dining area there. Moving on, the property, the room that members went to look at previously is at top right, and that on the left-hand side is the window to that unit looking down the light well, and then just final views. So, excuse me. Top left is the room concerned, and you see it is actually furnished out as a bedroom. It's not shown as a gym. And the remaining rooms in the property. Just on a separate point, it sometimes gets raised when we're looking at these schemes with the accommodation in the roof space. If you just look at the picture at the bottom right, often have a discussion about 1.5 metre high head heights, not head heights, room heights, and whether that's a usable space. That's actually below 1.5. You can see the before the slope kicks in, but notwithstanding the fact, even if you do have a sloping roof, that space is usable as for a bed, for a desk, potentially. Just to highlight that point, that's not relevant to the decision today. So in the updates, there's no further updates in this map, and so sole issue we're considering today is whether it is whether it requires planning permission for the property to have an additional occupier. So it's been approved as a C4 house in multiple occupation, which allows up to 6 occupiers, and the proposal is for 7 occupiers in the building, and therefore is that a material change of use which requires planning permission. So that's the only thing we're considering today. We're not looking at 50-metre radius or sandwiching or any of those tests in a HMO. Simply a legal point about whether it needs planning permission. So we've obviously gone into some detail in the report. I'm not going to rehearse that now, so there's a lot of technical detail in there. But that's set out to give you the idea of what's relevant in considering whether a material change of use has taken place. So the specific issue of whether an additional occupier in a C4 HMO, which has 6 occupiers and then goes to a 7-person, represents material change use. We've got to set out a wealth of appeal evidence in the report, and which shows a consistent approach by the planning inspectors, that 6 to 7 is not automatically a material change of use. In fact, we haven't found an appeal decision that states that going from 6 to 7 is material and does require planning permission. And in fact, as we set out in the report, where we've tried to argue the point that going from 6 to 7 does need planning permission, the appeals have been allowed, and also we've had costs awarded against us for what the inspector regarded as unreasonable behaviour. And those examples are current, you know, they come in over the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, one came in April at Margate Road, which is set out in the report. But just to highlight the point, and we set out in the report, it's a well understood concept, and looking back at guidance, which is 15 years old, and made that point that it's not a necessary material change of use. For the reasons set out in the report, we don't consider that this scheme needs planning permission. Therefore, there's no material change of use will take place, going from 6 to 7. And therefore, we recommend that the certificate is granted, Chair.
Thank you, and thanks for that explanation of what this particular application is about. Okay, questions. Oh, sorry, no, deputations. Beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. So, is it Oliver? Is Oliver here? The agent? No. So it's just Councillor Swan. Okay, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are several legitimate concerns with this application. Firstly, on the latest application, the provided drawings omit the roof plans provided with the previously rejected application. The previous application's roof plan highlighted the configuration of the various roof lines that block light to the proposed bedroom 2 on the rear ground floor, and subsequently led to its refusal. So I'm not sure as to why in the photos this room is now being used marketed as a bedroom if it had been rejected previously. I don't know whether I'm misunderstanding or missing something there. There doesn't appear to have been any changes to the layout, so the lack of light for that room remains. My second concern is that on this application the middle room is marked as a bedroom. You can't tell the numbering of the current applications, as for some reason none of the bedrooms have been numbered, but this is bedroom 2. This is the proposed bedroom that was rejected as per my initial point. So the focus of the application is the room labelled as the gym. So the rooms have not been labelled, the bedrooms have not been numbered, so it's not clear what is being looked at here. And I'm sure the committee agrees with me that it's important that information is clear and correct, as it could lead to the committee making a judgment based on incorrect and misleading information. So the new plans show no change from the original, so it must be refused again due to the lack of light. And if there have been changes to that window, then it's classed as a material change to the property, and therefore, according to the policy, it wouldn't be eligible for a certificate of lawful development anyway. It should also be raised that according to the submitted plans, the 2 en-suites on the second floor loft extension fall below the space required in our policy. If that could be clarified, please, because obviously we've already been here with this application once. Finally, the C3 to C3/C4 permission was only granted in October 2023, and as such, it's been an HMO for less than 2 years. So it can't gain a certificate of lawful development due to the passage of time, surely. Even if you take into consideration the reduction from 10 years to 4 years, it still falls foul of that. And I'd also add that without an up-to-date register of HMOs within the city, something that planning department has admitted it hasn't got on several occasions, in a road with numerous properties that require detailed investigation, it's madness to hit and hope that the count will miraculously work out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. The question, I'm just wondering whether the question that was just raised about, do you just want to say your first question?
Yes, so the plans that accompany this application show 2 en-suites that fall below the required space as per the policy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the planning permission was granted for the change of use back in 2023. They've clearly enacted that. So lawfully, the property is used as a HMO. In terms of where we're considering this very specific aspect about an additional occupier, we're not able to apply the planning merit tests. So this is specifically asking us a question about the legality, the lawfulness, I should say, not legality, the lawfulness of increasing the occupiers. So it's not a planning merit test, so the standards in the SPD and the planning policy don't apply. So it's unusual in my professional experience for a planning committee to debate an LDC like this for these reasons, because they're not planning merit assessments, Chair.
Thank you. I think Councillor Simpson was first and then Councillor Mason.
So is it that one? I'm guessing that's the reason we haven't got the dimensions in the book, and it wasn't up on the screen either then, because we're not considering spacing for this.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's straightforward, yeah.
When was the site visit?
Do you mean the site visit by the planning committee?
Yes, you said there was a site visit, but you didn't actually say the date.
I think that, on memory.
I wasn't on there.
January? February.
So it was after it was refused. You had the site visit, not before.
No. So there was a planning.
It was the reason. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think for clarity, especially to a lot of residents who can be watching this, can you differentiate between permission to be a sui generis and a permission for one extra person? Because in their eyes, they won't see any difference. But is it like with a sui generis, they could go up to 8 or 9, but with this, it is actually just one extra person, so they can't go any more above 7 if they get it?
So I'm not going to be as explicit as that because it's a value judgment in each case. So let's say we had a proposal where we had 5 beds, 5 people occupying, and then the proposal was, let's say 8 or 9. We have taken that view in the past that that's clearly a material change of use. That's a different between C4 and a sui gen. In between, there's a point where it's not as clear. So what we're saying to you is we are very clear that 6 to 7 doesn't automatically mean it needs planning permission, and we've given you all the evidence as to why. You don't need to know whether a different test might get a different result, because that's not what we're being asked. If, in the future, someone suggested, can we have 8 people occupying, can we have 9, we've got to go and make that value judgment again based on the facts of the case. We're not going to prejudge that because in effect, we don't know. We just have to look at the details at the time, Chair.
I don't want to be that guy or be pedantic, but it says occupation by one additional person, so that should be what it is, full stop. It shouldn't be, oh, well, you know, it's a grey area, it could mean more, could be less. I mean, if we're going to judge it on one additional person, we should be assured as a committee that it will be just one additional person, because otherwise, in my mind, this is just a loophole to get past the refusal we had in February, and that was refused on good grounds, which, to be frankly honest, could be carried on to refusing this as well, especially point 2 of the reasons for refusal, especially if they have changed the window. I just think there needs to be a lot of clarity, more black and white, as it normally tends to be in planning, and less grey.
Okay. Sorry if my previous answer wasn't sufficiently clear on that. So the proposed use is for 7 people to occupy. So if more than 7 occupied the property, that would not be in relation to what they've said on the application. So that's a different proposal. So in terms of what you're looking at, yes, they're showing you a 7-bed occupation, 7 people in the property. So that's what we're considering. If more people occupied the property, that wouldn't necessarily be in accordance with the lawful development certificate if it's granted, because they're specifically about 7.
Would have to apply if they wanted 8.
Yeah, potentially, and it might.
But we see potentially they would or they wouldn't.
So it may need planning permission at 8. It may be that they may seek to go down the lawful development certificate route again. We don't want to prejudge that. We're not there. We're simply looking at 7 beds. And also, if you look at the floor plan, there isn't an additional bedroom waiting to be converted. I mean, there might be dual occupancy, etc. But in terms of what you're looking at, it's simply about the 7, yeah.
I think Chair, this is what really concerns me, is that it's essentially saying if we refuse on good grounds, then this can be the next stage. Instead of it being you know, because, you know, in some cases we have like C3 to sui genre, it gets refused, and they bring one back that says C3 to C4, or they go to appeal. I'm just worried that this is going to become the new norm where we refuse on good grounds and then we're going to have a completely different angle to it, which doesn't take for spacing standards, even though the spacing standards fall below what's required.
So I'm not sure that actually is the case, that it falls below the space standards, but again, that's not. Okay, but so when we granted the 6, it did fall within the space standards, and the room as shown does fall within the space standards. So I don't want to get distracted by that, because that's not the test I'm asking you to apply. But you need to accept that the planning process allows various ways to attack this issue. Because of the nature of what you can apply for under a lawful development certificate, and the lack of clarity. Sorry, clarity is not the right word. Because the system exists to allow you to ask the question of the council: is this actually a material change of use? So, and that's a well-established process and principle, and the reason that we set out in the report is those kind of factors that might mean it's material, because additional activity, numbers of people, noise, additional waste, all those factors, and reason for setting that out in the report, that those standards are no different. So our waste standards are no different, our parking standards are no different. We don't have the evidence that ASB is greater between a 6-bed or a 7-bed, or that noise is substantially different between a 6 and 7. That's the reason why we're saying we don't think there's a material change of use.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I would like to know what is the status now of the planning decision which we made some 3 months ago to refuse this on planning grounds with regard to what was then bedroom 2, which has not been changed in the application we see before us. So what is the status? Because we have refused this on a ground which has not been addressed.
So just checking with my colleagues, Chair, so they haven't appealed that refusal. So as it stands, that planning permission was refused. They'll run out of time to refuse it after 6 months. So they're a few months into that. So as it stands, that planning permission was refused. They can pursue an appeal in respect of that. In terms of that question, that nothing is happening with that previous refusal, because it was refused by members and they haven't exercised their right of appeal as of yet.
Okay, so it's still, the refusal still stands. The second thing was the question which has been raised by Councillor Swan about whether sufficient time has passed for this actually to be considered for the certificate of lawful development. Has it been an HMO for long enough for that to take place?
If you look at 2.7 in the report, so we did grant the change of use of the property, parking the most recent refusal. So originally we did grant the change of use from C3 to a flexible C3 or C4. It's evident that they have enacted that planning permission, because it's clearly in use as a HMO, and we've seen that from the interior, individual rooms, the works have been carried out. So at the point that they carried out that planning permission in 2.7, that meant the lawful use of the property changed. So that's what we call a new chapter in the planning history. At that point that they implemented that planning permission, that property changed from C3 to a flexible C3, C4. For the sake of argument, let's say C4, so HMO. So the lawful use of the property is now as C4. Doesn't need 10 years. They implemented a planning permission that we granted. That changed the use of the property. So knowing that the property is in C4, they can ask this question about whether an additional occupier needs planning permission.
I'm picking up on Councillor Mason's comment. This is extremely confusing, this, and when the whole purpose of all this is to provide accommodation of a standard that we think is livable and that fits in with licensing and planning requirements. We did go on this site visit, and I went. I think Councillor Vallely went. Councillor Vernon-Jackson went. As usual, we were underrepresented at the site visits. But what we found was that the bedroom 2, which we had felt was underlit, was indeed underlit and occupied. Now, it was occupied by a young woman who didn't appear to want to open the curtains, let alone have any more light in the window. So I just want to say she was perfectly happy with the room, but that is not a planning consideration. And firmly isn't a planning consideration. There was no mention on the old plans of a gym at all. No, nothing at all about a gym. And we were quite satisfied, actually, that the state of the place, if I can speak for all of you, was nice, and we went round the whole house fairly quickly. I think one of us, Councillor Jackson, had to rush off for another meeting, but we saw the whole property. We thought it was nice, high standard. Everything else about it was fine. We didn't object, I think, at the time, to the increasing numbers. We object to the fact that one person who one would normally expect would like to have the curtains open sometimes, was living in a place that didn't have enough light. And my objection to that still remains, because the fact that this particular individual seemed to have some kind of light phobia is not something that I could apply to every tenant living in that room. I don't have any objection to somebody living but we didn't reject it because of it being 7 bedrooms. We objected because one of the bedrooms was substandard. And that is actually what it says under paragraph 2.5. So I've got a real problem with this, because now they're basically saying, we haven't, if they'd changed the windows. So this isn't a normal application, this isn't the right application to test on us whether we believe that one additional person is development or not, because I happen to probably err on the side that it's not. But this one isn't about that. It's about a young woman living in a house, in a room that isn't adequately lit. And I would be minded to, that's why we refused it. We didn't refuse it because we said it potentially created problems being 7, but I don't think any of us thought it wasn't adequate for 7. We just said one of the rooms isn't livable. And I regard this as not a good case for us to look at in terms of extra numbers.
Question.
So
I know you've gone into
question
comments,
is,
but I understand why. Yeah.
I just was explaining the context because it's very unusual. The question is, how can we have this in front of us, given that we found that room with some standard? I don't mind if it's a different way of applying. I still feel that room had inadequate light. It was literally a tiny little window above the bed, albeit she likes to live with the curtains closed, but that's irrelevant. And there was no mention of a gym in the application. We did not object to it on the grounds of being 7 not being acceptable. So my comment is, how have we got ourselves in this situation?
Chair, just for clarity, of course, taking members' minds back to the 24/11/75 in 2.4 of the report. Of course, in our original report, we did advise that we didn't consider that needed planning permission. So our position in relation to 24/11/75 is it wasn't a material change of view. So we're in the same position. We're being consistent because we don't believe that there was a change of use requiring planning permission. So therefore, notwithstanding they applied for planning permission, our recommendation was that it should be granted unconditionally. Now, members...
I'm not criticising planning officers for their recommendation. It's just that if you go on a site visit and you discover somebody living in a nearly dark room, in all consciousness, I wasn't prepared to give it planning application, and it was because of that window not being big enough. Now, the developer, the owner, could have put that right.
So just to follow on, and I do want to be clear that we're not we're not considering the amenity of that occupier in this instance. We're considering a legal test about whether planning permission is required. And so I highlighted the 73 Margate appeal decision deliberately because the inspector was critical of the authority for, in effect, misusing the process to try and refuse a lawful development certificate on a planning merit issue, which is not what it needed to do. That wasn't the test. So I have to caution against refusing the application because we object to the living conditions in a particular room. That's not what we're considering today. So I do want to be sort of very clear on that we need to focus our minds on the materiality issue, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Candlish.
So I may regret asking the question, but I will do so anyway. I'm trying to understand what the implications of approval are. So were I to believe that the property could potentially be used by up to 7 people, but is currently only allowed to go to 6 because of the decision that the Planning Committee made last time, what can the landlord, for example, not do that they would be able to do if they got this?
So look at the proposed floor plans in 2.2, or we can pop them back up on the screen. It's chiefly that it allows, there are 7 rooms within the property, and it would allow 7 bedrooms to be occupied by the property occupied by a total of 7 people in those 7 bedrooms indicated. So that's their proposal. Their proposal is, at the moment, we've got a planning permission that says we can have 6 occupiers because we see 4. Our proposal is we think it doesn't need planning permission for 7 people to occupy the building, and that's the test.
No more questions. I have no more questions, but I will make a comment.
Is this a question, Councillor Simpson?
It's going to be a comment.
Okay.
I was waiting for Peter first to do my comment.
Can I just clarify, we finished with questions. I suppose we in the comments another question might... Are there any more questions, clear questions at this point? Councillor Smythe.
I mean, I have no objection to 7 people in this building at all. But the question is, how can we live with ourselves if we are agreeing that that bedroom with that absolutely minute window is adequate accommodation? And I can't live with myself thinking of anybody else but the young woman who's living in there who's quite happy with it. This is cheating. I have no objection to 7 here, never did actually, but I do object to assigning as a bedroom a room that has very, very inadequate light. That's all, and I will therefore either have to abstain or refuse it, not on the grounds of 7, but on the grounds that one of the rooms is uninhabitable.
So can I just, I've got a clarification question. So that at the moment, there's planning permission has been refused. We're being asked to talk about something completely different, as if it were another property in principle. What we're asking for is a principled decision. This is what I understand. A principled decision about whether one more person in an HMO makes a material difference, and you've outlined really clearly that there's been enough test cases that in principle, +1, whatever our personal views about it being done by stealth or whatever, we can put that aside and say in planning terms, there's enough, as you've evidenced here, that +1 in principle is acceptable. So we're led to believe with your recommendation that actually that makes sense. But what I want to know is how those 2 worlds marry up, because they don't have planning permission because it was refused because of the reasons that Councillor Smythe has clearly outlined.
Okay, so I'm going to describe a concept called the planning unit. So the planning unit is the building that you see. You know, back in 2023, it was a single dwelling house, now it's HMO. Once we granted that change of use, that allowed the property to be used by up to 6 people under the C4 consent as a HMO. And just to highlight a point that we have made many times, that only needs planning permission by virtue of an Article 4 that it covers the entire city, and over the majority of the country it simply permitted development. So at the point that the property became lawfully a HMO, that covers the whole of the building. And so any use within the building that reflects the HMO use is lawful. I think I understand very much where concern lies with members, and it's a very reasonable position. I think the point I'm going to highlight is why planning is a crude tool to deal with these issues against licensing. So at the point we granted the 2023 planning permission and they enacted it, it became a HMO. That's the end of the process for planning, notwithstanding, we've probably got a condition retaining a cycle store. But licensing have the ability to go back in every 5 years and check the adequacy of the living conditions for occupiers, and planning doesn't have that ability. We can't roll back on a consent that we've granted. So what we're going to do through the planning process is have best endeavours to try and ensure that there's an adequate living environment for occupiers. That's why we've got standards in the SPD around space for rooms, for kitchens, living spaces, etc., all that information. But at the point that we grant it, that's in effect the end of the matter for planning. So the difficulty is our ability to go in and control uses within the building that's lawfully a HMO is the point I'm trying to sort of make.
Can I have a follow-up? As I'm chair. I don't understand then why it was refused. Well, how that refusal on those planning grounds.
It was refused against the wishes of the planning officers.
Yeah,
it was very clear, their recommendation,
Okay.
and I have
All right.
every sympathy with that. And I have every sympathy with what David is saying today. I just want to say that I'm not in any way criticising the planning office, but I can't unsee something. And I've been brought up, as you have, within child protection. There's all sorts of times when you wish you could unsee some wrongdoing. And my job as a politician is to stand up when there's a wrongdoing. And I can't sit in this chamber and let that room go past without the window being increased. 7 people, great. But I have a conscience here. I will not stand up publicly and approve this because they haven't made that window bigger. That's all they've got to do. And I think bringing this to test the concept of will we agree that planning permission wasn't required for 7 is wrong. And I don't mind being put on the spot for it. I mean, in child protection work, as you know, if you as a human being suspect some child is being abused, you have a duty, however difficult it is, to go and tell the authorities. I have a conscience about this. I will not just say 7's fine, because I already know, because I've been in that room and talked to the young woman living there, that it's not an acceptable place to live. And that's just very simple. I'm really not trying to take David or his staff on the basis of the principles of what they're trying to do. But this is not a good application to do it on.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Simpson, who's been very patient. So do you want after Councillor Simpson, you want to come in?
For me, Chair, this just creates a really slippery slope, because once this happens with this one, we're going to expect anything that we refuse on good grounds to come in with this certificate. I kind of feel like it's the landlords potentially being impatient. They don't want to go through the process of appeal. And it's just kind of, it is cheating, really. I think that was the best way of wording it. It's finding a workaround when it shouldn't. I mean, I think it should be refused based on on number 2, with the proposed development would not. I know it's very issue because it's a certificate, but the principle's the same. I mean, even to the point we could say it's not suitable for a certificate of lawful development for 7 people. That's how I would word it, because that's the fact of that's the reality of this situation, and I'm pretty sure there's better wording, but this can't happen, because it will set a precedent for every single refusal on good grounds.
Got a proposed compromise for us, but
you might be able to help us.
Yes, thank you. I think there is a very real danger that members are conflating applications and confusing and mixing up several applications all into one. It's a very narrow consideration today. It's a very straightforward consideration, and one that has gone to the inspector many, many times, and one that has been settled very clearly, and the report is particularly clear about that. I think there's a real danger that the Planning Committee takes umbrage in the approach that the applicant's taking, and that's a very dangerous perception of the situation. It's a lawful application, it's a perfectly legal application, and I think perhaps I might be able to clarify things a little by asking planning officers a question about the current situation, because the property does have, I've got a bit of feedback, is that just, apologies for that. The current position, as I understand it, is the premises has a planning permission and an established use as an HMO. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And they're simply asking whether the additional person at this stage, in terms of the lawful certificate of lawful use, whether an additional person requires planning permission.
Yes, that's correct.
And your established view is that it doesn't require planning permission and that the certificate ought to be granted on that basis.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
If planning permission isn't actually required, which is your view, they could, theoretically, actually just start exercising that right in any event and not apply for a certificate of lawful use.
Yes. So I mean that's correct. So where they don't need planning permission for what they're proposing, they can simply go ahead and do it. They're just seeking formal confirmation from the LPA that that's what they're doing is lawful.
And that's not something that we would encourage. We'd encourage that applicants come to the authority and seek our advice and guidance and make an application and clarify the situation as this applicant has. That's correct?
Yes, yeah, we much prefer to take this through a formal process so people have clarity, they have a certificate, they can rely on that certificate, and if queried, they can show what I've done is lawful.
And this will be my last question, just to clarify the point that I made opening, is that if members do refuse this application today, the very real probability is that we'll be facing an appeal and costs at the end of the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly our experience to date over the last few years for the examples given in the report, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Mason. Thank you, by the way.
The 2023 application, which was approved, the minute reads, and this is the minute, the fact that the living room, which appears on your plan as bedroom 2, was not required by the HMO guidance, as well as the combined living kitchen dining room, and that it might be sought for use as a bedroom in a future application, was not a reason to seek to bring its use under planning control. That would be a matter for a future application. That future application was the one which we considered in February 2025, and we resolved that the application be refused due to the inadequate light to bedroom 2 and therefore unacceptable living conditions for the occupier. If we were acting properly and lawfully then, according to the best advice which we had, and we were acting properly and lawfully in February 2025, then surely the room which is marked as a bedroom on the plans which you have before you, on page 56, the proposed ground floor plan, which you will see that very small bedroom which was bedroom 2, that surely cannot be used. So can we then say, and this is the question, that we have no objection to the increase in status, provided that our planning objection of February 2025, the grounds for that remain extant or remain in force. Because we acted both in 2023 and in 2025 on advice.
Chair, just so I'm clear, is the suggestion that we grant the certificate, but say that the bedroom to the ground floor rear bedroom can't be used as a bedroom?
I think that's where
Okay. Okay. I appreciate the intent, and obviously I'm going to say why that's not possible for us to do within the scope of the application before us, because, as I say, going back to the issue of the property itself as a planning unit, the property can be used as a HMO, and we'd simply been asked this question about whether it's lawful. It's not a planning application where we can have conditions and restrictions on that. So the short answer is no, we can't misuse the process to grant the certificate with a condition, because that would be going beyond its remit. The only other point I just wanted to make is we were clear previously that we didn't think it needed planning permission for the reasons that we set out, and they're set out in greater detail here. One of the issues that we potentially lost, I mean, if you could just highlight the ground floor bedroom on the far left. So on that proposal, which was refused, there was a proposal to install a roof light into that building, which is that rectangle you can see next to the bed. Now, that hasn't been installed, but had we granted the planning permission, we could have had a condition to install that and improve the amenity in that building. But obviously, having refused it, we've lost that opportunity, which is an unfortunate consequence of where we've the process that's been undertaken. But going back to the basic point, no, you can only grant or refuse a certificate, and you need to have well-founded grounds for refusing the certificate.
I mean, I accept we are where we are. How we handled the previous application in 2025, I think, could have been better. We could have approved it and said on condition that you get that window sorted out. And I can't remember if we had that exact discussion. It would have been better if we had. But we are where we are. We cannot. I wondered if there's some way we can postpone a decision and make sure that licensing enforce that condition for us, and we can be satisfied that that work has been done before agreeing it. I've got no problems personally on agreeing it for 7. I never did, but as soon as we were sent on a site visit, I could see that room was uninhabitable, and I seriously cannot go ahead with approving that. Are we at comment stage? I mean, I'd like to suggest that we
go to Councillor Simpson to see
because my question is, we're in a difficult position, to some extent of our own making. I'm not, and I understand exactly where the planning officer is coming from. But my point remains that I can't, in my
I've got a feeling the suggestion around getting licensing to do theirs before we come
or
out.
Making it conditional or making it clear that our previous planning application wasn't a criticism of 7. It was a criticism of that uninhabitable room.
So just to confirm the point, our understanding is licensing have licensed the property for 7 people already. So evidently against their standards, they're satisfied because that room is occupied. They're satisfied against their standards, and that room is adequate for use as a HMO.
How many of us have been in that room? I've been. It's
Chair, I just wonder, we do need to not confuse the two regimes. We've got to deal with planning, and we've got to deal with licensing separately.
Okay, that's what I thought you were going to say. Councillor Simpson.
It does make you wonder if the applicant isn't confident they would win on appeal for the original one in February that they lost, whereas with here, there is confidence that they would win on appeal. But I do wonder if if the inspector would actually consider the fact that it seems like I don't want to say like an oxymoron, but it does seem like a contradiction, really, doesn't it? You're given permission for one, but you've refused the other, but it's technically the same. However you look at it, this is not about 7 people in those rooms as is, not including the gym. This is about having 7 person in that room specifically. And I think that is where everyone here can't consciously agree with it, because this is not about having 7 people in the house, it's about 7 people with the condition they're using that room. And that's why I think Councillor Mason was right in some ways, well, in all ways, in the sense of that room should not be used as a room. But I don't know how the best way we can, I mean, if we refuse it, it's going to go to appeal, so it's very tough.
A lot of the appeals that we've lost have not had this specific focus on standards. I've been through them in detail. A lot of them were rightly run on appeal. We've had relatively few that were refused because this didn't meet our standards for living accommodation.
Is there anything to be gained from? Is there anything that time, as in deferring it, could in terms of the relationship between the refused application?
I think the difficulty, as I said before, is you're conflating several applications into one. The application that's in front of you is very straightforward, and it's simply a determination as to whether or not the increase in one occupancy figure is actually a material change of use. That's all you're determining. You're not determining whether a particular room is or isn't habitable, whether it's acceptable as a scheme. Those were matters that you have had sight of and have in your mind because of previous applications, but they're not relevant to today's determination. And as awkward as that is, and as my advice to the committee is that the likelihood is, based on the previous determinations from the inspector and the facts as set out in the report, which are particularly clear, the authority is likely to lose on appeal.
Chair, and I was just wanted to, emphasise the point. We deliberately quoted in 614 the Margate Road decision where it was allowed and we did lose costs, and the inspector in the cost decision does identify what, I'll put it as an abusive process, in effect to refuse a certificate on planning merit grounds, which was not the test we needed to apply.
I agree with all this, but it didn't make us do something that was against the interest of some poor individual who won't have enough daylight. Yeah. Margate Road was a different case. I think we went, as a council, we've been going about these in the wrong way. I'm not somebody who thinks we should have done all those, but this...
Councillor Candlish, you want to speak?
I've been waiting to get to comment, I guess, but we seem to be kind of there. So I know the government are proposing to completely remove the power of this committee to look at any development of less than properties and give it entirely away to officers. I understand that's the proposal on the table from them, and I absolutely oppose that. But whilst we are where we are, this committee, if it is to have any meaning or power, has to be able to make its decisions stick. And we decided that the property was not fit for 7 people by virtue of that room being incomplete. That has not been changed. And my understanding is that this certificate could permit that to be happening. So I certainly have been against some of my better instincts, perhaps. I've occasionally been forced to accept voting for something to avoid the very high probability of the council receiving costs awarded against it. But on this occasion, I think there's quite a principle at stake in here. Does the planning committee's decisions have any weight or meaning? If there are ways of circumventing in this, then our decision is being circumvented, and I'm wasting my time. So I will not be voting in favour of this certificate.
Thank you.
So I'll propose refusal of the certificate.
Okay.
I think Councillor Candlish is correct, and I think we need to stick with what we know, and with respect to the lister, you said several. It's 2 applications that you're saying that we're getting confused with, and it's the same address. So for me, it's just the same address and it's the same principle.
Thank you. So that's right. Does anyone want to second?
Councillor Chair, could I add one thing to it? Because I wanted to explore the point we all seem to be coming to, that with conditions, we might be willing to accept this. You know, if the decisions of the Planning Committee had been followed, we would be making a different decision. Now, the officers are telling me that it is likely that the conditions we attach will not be accepted by the planning inspectorate. I've already said that I'm willing to accept that risk because of the principle. Therefore, in our submission, can we still not state what we would like? Because I think it explains better to the planning inspectorate why we are doing what we are doing and what we are trying to achieve, because I'm aware that the planning inspectorate awards costs when it views something as unreasonable, whereas I think we have a reasonable point, which they may ultimately disagree with, which is we think there is a conflict here between a decision that we have reasonably made. So I would like to have the conditions that we articulated included.
Thank you. Were you seconding, or was Councillor not seconding? Okay. Are there any?
And I'm happy to add what Councillor Kench has added, that
Okay.
the reason we're refusing is because of this, and we feel that this needs to be investigated so that it's very transparent.
Is there a counter proposal?
I don't know if there's an option of us defer. I understand this is a different piece of legislation than the normal planning commissions. I do know that. But, you know, the sensible way through this is for somebody to talk to the applicant and say there are people on there that can't do this because of this substandard room, but they'd be happy to I mean, I wish we had granted permission for 7 with a condition of putting that window right. Is there a human way through this that we could avoid this? Because as
If
it
we
stands,
defer, that's what I was kind of thinking
yeah,
about. I know the 2 things are separate.
Yeah.
They're not
I'm
separate.
just going to offer you a way forward,
yes.
Chair. So we don't agree, as officers, we don't agree with the position that we should refuse a certificate on the basis of the amenity in that room. However, there's a possible way forward because the original floor plan of the 2023 permission is different to what's been built. It's very difficult to argue about the extent of harm of that breach, but that's technically a breach of the planning permission. So they had a planning permission, had a layout, they didn't do it in accordance with the plan. So that, and it does relate specifically to the room that we're considering, because back in 2023 that was going to be a living room and it had a different layout. Simon, if you just do the cursor where you are before, that corridor, the room was going to cut off diagonally through basically where that bed is. So technically there's a breach of the planning permission, for the 2023 planning permission. I would argue, or my advice would be, the most defensible reason we can offer is that they hadn't implemented the planning permission correctly. Therefore, in terms of the lawfulness of the use, they can't go from C4 to sui generis because it's, in effect, what they're doing is unlawful. It would be best to obviously resolve all these issues with a planning application in the circumstances, if the applicant is listening and is prepared to do that. But obviously, I can understand if they may not want to do that, bearing in mind they put in a planning permission and was refused. But in terms of a potentially defensible case, that would be my advice, that we pursue that. If we pursue a case that says it needs planning permission because we don't think the living conditions are adequate, we can be guaranteed to fail, Chair.
He didn't show a gym. I mean, I just say there was no gym on any of the plans we've previously seen. He couldn't put anything in there.
So, can I just
Happy to add it.
Yeah, I'm just. So, the original floor plan is different. They breached planning permission from 2022. So it's not been implemented. We'd encourage them to put in planning, resolve with that planning application.
They could resolve the issue with a subsequent planning application, but in terms of what you're looking at today, that potentially gives you an argument that you may lose
for refusal.
But it's a better reason than what's being advanced.
Yeah, thank you very much.
In those negotiations, say all they have to do is enlarge that window a bit.
I guess we're back to the principles, though, aren't we?
No. I mean, you refuse or approve the certificate. If you refuse the certificate, they have a right of appeal. But they may be listening and may, as I say, the applicant may pursue a further planning application.
I think I get what you're saying, Councillor Smythe. What you're saying is, on a human level, sensible, common sense level, then let it. But we're dealing with planning, so we're with planning systems. So what we have in front of us is really clear kind of decision. But I empathise with where you're trying to go, which is so. I think that's what we were trying to get some help with. That maybe if the person was listening, that they might take on board some of the comments.
It would have been better to agree it without a decision on the river, on the window. And we weren't, the paperwork doesn't show that we were objecting to, there were people in the room who did object, but we weren't objecting to 7, we were objecting to an unlivable room. Yeah. And I do think that that is the message that needs to come across. Using a different form of bureaucracy to make somebody suffer what could be for many an unbearable living situation is a very different thing than we're talking about, and somehow that's all they've got to do.
I haven't forgotten, by the way, that you've agreed to use that word. I'm just going to Councillor Mason.
I hear very much what the officers suggest, which is that we refuse this, and their grounds for refusing is that they have not fulfilled their October 23 planning permission, that they're in breach of that. And I think that if we could refuse it on those grounds, but may we suggest that the detail which has been mentioned by other councillors concerning the planning permission which we refused in 2025 be brought to the attention of the planning inspectorate when they consider this.
Yeah, I mean, we'd relate all relevant planning history. The planning history is obviously in the committee report when we do an appeal, all documents are sent to the inspector, and so they'll be able to investigate those previous decisions, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all. A very good and robust discussion. So I think I'm just going to clarify that we're aware of what's before us, and we are refusing the certificate of lawfulness based on the original planning application being breached.
Not being lawfully implemented, Chair.
Not being lawfully implemented. Thank you for helping me. And that would be resolved with a planning application, with a request also that the other relevant planning application, the content of which may be communicated to the planning inspector. Is that correct?
Yes, and also they do. I mean, it's unlikely they would do this, but they could simply amend the internals to comply with their planning permission after the fact.
Thank you.
Do we have a proposer formally?
We did that already. We had
apologies.
Councillor Simpson proposed and Councillor North seconded. I did get that before we added the other bits on. So, good for... No, I'm very grateful for you clarifying, just in case I do forget. So, all those in favour of that proposal? There you go, unanimous. So that certificate of lawfulness is refused. Thank you, Councillor Swan, for coming along. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, Right, so next, item 8 is 129 New Road. I'll hand over to, is it you again? Yeah.
It's me, Chair, thank you. And then I'll pass over to Mr Turner for the last item. So yes, 129 New Road. So this is a change of use from a CC dwelling house to a 7-bed, 7-person sui generis. And this is a resubmission of a scheme that was refused by members before due to concerns about the room sizes. So his property, again, mid-terrace property, sizable back garden, you can see with this particular property. There's a property in the street scene, and as you say, fairly typical for the housing stock in that part of the city. So, question of the mixed and balanced communities. You'll see in the report that we've identified 4 existing HMOs, so those are the stars within, you can see on the plan there. This would add to the total of 5, so that's 5 out of 89 properties, so 5.62%, and does not breach any of the other guidance in terms of sandwiching or 3 in a row of the properties. So the scheme will be facilitated by some additional extensions to the property. So the loft works on the bottom proposed elevations, they're permitted development, and then the rear extension has already planning permission through what's called the prior approval process for a larger rear extension. So existing layout, very typical, just slightly unusual layout in the rear wing at the first floor where we seem to have a sort of large space, not part of a bedroom, but does have a bedroom window looking straight down into the opposing property. So in terms of the layout, we would end up with a 7-bed HMO in this instance, communal living space and kitchen to the ground floor, 2 rooms ensuite at ground floor. First floor, 3 more ensuite rooms, and then 2 in the roof in the loft conversion. I'll move on from that one actually, Simon, because there's a comparison plan I'm going to show you between the refused and approved. Just to highlight the site layout top left, and plenty of room for a cycle store and substantial amenity space for any occupiers even after the extension is carried out. Just some views of the existing property, which shows the outlook from the various rooms. And just, I think, on the next slide, yes, so bottom left, the rear ground floor bedroom has these full-size windows, bottom left, which look out into the light well. Notwithstanding that its rear of the property is north-facing, we're satisfied with the light and outlook and aspect from that particular room. So a couple of points which were a concern when members dealt with the application last time. So they've provided clarity here that the room in the roof meets a test because more than 75% of the head height is 2.3 metres high. And so it's a sizable room overall, 19 square metres. With a partial sloping ceiling in the bottom of the room. And then just to show you the comparison between the refused scheme and the current scheme, so current proposal on the left and on the right, the differences on the ground floor are not significant, but mainly the changes have been facilitated by moving where the staircase is. The staircase is always going to be moved. It's currently right behind where bedroom 7 is, where bedroom 7's ensuite will now be. But to facilitate the changes that are shown, that's the main change that has gained the extra space. So going up to the first floor, so this was the concern of members before. So right-hand side was the refused scheme, whereby members are concerned once that corridor was taken out, that the overall space was marginally below 10 square metres. We would have to say we did caution against refusal purely on that basis as a minor technical failure. Nonetheless, The applicant has sought to amend the layout, and now looking at that rectangle, which we've measured ourselves, we get above 10 square metres in that bedroom 3. The remaining rooms all meet the standards, for those reasons we're now again content to recommend approval, Chair.
Thank you. So we have one deputation from Jonathan, so you have up to 6 minutes.
So, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Risbridger. I'm acting on behalf of the applicant, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. This application seeks permission to convert a 3-bedroom house into a 7-bedroom, 7-person HMO, with all rooms having private en-suites. The previous application, refused in February, was declined due to bedroom 3 falling slightly below the required 10 square metres, once the internal corridor was excluded from the measurement. We've taken that feedback, made clear measurable improvements. The ensuite in bedroom 3 has now been relocated to run along the wall shared with bedroom 4, which allows bedroom 3's usable area to exceed the 10 square metre requirement. To accommodate this, the ensuite for bedroom 4 has been repositioned adjacent to the stairs, ensuring both rooms are fully compliant. The corridor space is now appropriately excluded from bedroom 3's measurement and is shown separately on the plans as 0.76 square metres of additional floor space. With these revisions, the proposal fully complies with all space and amenity standards and directly addresses the objections raised in the previous planning refusal. I would also just like to add that the communal is larger on the larger side at 25.81 square metres, with a large roof lantern for the additional light. The bedrooms all meet the 10 square metre requirement, with a large 19.1 square metre room in the loft. We also have an additional WC on the ground floor that can be used by our fortnightly cleaners and, in the case of emergencies, with any of the en-suites. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for waiting all this time as well. Okay, we'll go to questions first. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. Question, how close can an extension be to a neighbour's fence or neighbour's wall? What's the limit of the allowed, how close can they be to it?
They can build on the common boundary. So under permitted development, there's various requirements about height when you're on the boundary and within 2 metres of the boundary. But no, in terms of actually building on the boundary, that's something that's potentially permissible through the system. That doesn't exempt them from their responsibilities under the Party Wall Act. So they need to engage with their neighbour and agree that.
Because I'm looking at like the previous application and the new application, and not only have they found more room obviously in the kitchen dining, but they've actually found more room in the bedrooms. I'm wondering, where do they find all that extra room? Because normally when these applications come in, they're normally at the limit as it is, to the point that I wouldn't even call it an L garden anymore. It just becomes an I garden because there's nothing at the back. So I'm just curious of how close is this permitted rights extension to the neighbour's fence, wall, whatever it is, and would it be overbearing as they have extended it? They might have a few more metres, I don't know. I'm just asking because we haven't got the dimensions of the entire property.
So if I take you to the planning history in the report, so 4.1, yeah. So there's a, oh no, sorry, not that one. It's listed elsewhere, isn't it? That's not listed in the planning history. Apologies for that. So, no, planning permission has been given under this streamlined process. Here it is, 4.5. Found it eventually. Apologies. So, 12 years ago, something like that, the government changed the permitted development regs that allowed you to double the size of a rear extension subject to going through what's called a prior approval process. So what that means is you submit what's in all extents a planning application to the council, but you have a default that you can erect the size of extension shown as long as you go through this process first. And the only test we had to apply is whether anyone objects. So we send letters to neighbours, and if they object, then we get to consider the living conditions aspect, not what it looks like, not what it affects conservation, anything like that, just whether it has an acceptable impact on neighbours' living conditions. So in this instance, we didn't receive any objections to the prior approval process, so it passed all the tests and therefore they can erect it. So under that process, yeah, they can build on the common boundary. If you couldn't build under the common boundary under permitted development rights, we'd be awash with household applications in Portsmouth, simply because of the nature of the housing stock. So yes, it allows for flexibility and pragmatic, but it does impose some controls over height directly on the boundary, particularly to the eaves.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thanks. Are there any comments? Is there anyone who wants? Councillor Mason.
I think the applicant has obviously taken into consideration the points which we made when this came up previously and has met our concerns, and so I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. I think it's quite straightforward. Are there any counter proposals? No. In which case we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions. So there's 2 abstentions. So I'm happy to say that the officer's recommendation is approved. Thank you. Sorry you had to wait so long for such a quick, and you'll be pleased that it was easy though. And on to the last agenda item, which is 58 Stanley Avenue, which is a retention of dormer to front roof slope. I'm going to hand over to Simon to explain this one.
Thank you, Chair. We have an application at 58 Stanley Avenue in Baffin's Ward for the retention of a dormer to the front roof slope. The application has come to the committee because the applicant is the spouse of a member of staff at the City Council. It's a mid-terrace house, as you can see from the plan, and there is the dormer as constructed. So in essence, a planning consent from an application 2021 approved in 2022 was not implemented correctly, hence leading ultimately to this application to seek its retention. You can start to see, I will show you the comparison plans in a moment, which will show you the difference between the approved plans and what was actually constructed. This is a slightly closer up picture, so you can see the cladding, dark grey composite cladding, which is what the first of the breaches in respect. It doesn't match the roof tiles. That breach is not so terrible, although it doesn't actually match. It would be better if it did, but otherwise it's the size of the windows as approved. They were much larger as built. Unfortunately, they're rather, no offence to the owner of the property, are rather mean looking, inappropriately small with respect to the size of the dormer and the construction and the area of cladding. So there you can see it sitting in the street. It's a relatively clean roof line with shared chimney stacks every other property. So your fireplaces backing onto each other from neighbours. But actually in this particular street, there are a number of other dormers consented over the years by the local planning authority with a number of different designs and appearances. We've got further details on all of these, should you wish to look at them. Some of them built entirely in accordance with the plans, many not, to some degree or other. This is the consented plans. To be clear, the authority wasn't happy with the size of the dormer, but because of previous consents in the street, the character of that street, although it's only a small percentage of the properties have dormer windows, but it was sufficient, I think about 12, it's in the report somewhere, there was enough of a precedent there to say we can't resist another dormer of a similar size on the street. In other streets, in other parts of the city, certainly nearby in Baffins, where there's no dormers like this, we would quite happily refuse that and be supported at appeal. So it depends on the character and precedent in the street. We didn't feel that this one was appropriate, but because of the other local existing character and previous consents, some older, some newer, we felt we needed to approve it, because otherwise it could have been granted by appeal. There was a rear dormer on the left-hand side there, not part of the application, that was permitted development. So prior to the development, there were no clean roofscape, as I described a few moments ago. As built, I'll try and get to the comparison plans. Here we go. So on the left, that was the approved plan, against better judgment in terms of scale, but at least the design was better, and that is what has been built. You've seen the photograph. So this is a good example. Some people think that a retrospective application for attention of is a fait accompli. It demonstrates not. The planning authority would not have approved the dormer as built, and now the application is before us. We recommend, therefore, not to approve it. But unusually, you would have seen at the end of the report, there's a different test of then do we go on to take enforcement action. And that is a different test to the granting or refusing of a planning consent. So although we recommend to refuse the application, we do not recommend that enforcement action is taken to remove it or amend it. And we wanted to say that publicly because the spouse of the applicant being a member of staff, it was better to do that publicly than it being seen to be done behind closed doors. To explain to you, enforcement action must be taken in the public interest. It must be proportionate. It must be expedient. Now, although there's a breach of planning control, and we didn't feel that the existing dormer should have been granted planning permission, it wouldn't have been, there is nevertheless discretion as to whether to take action, including the European Convention on Human Rights, where the authority has to consider the potential impact on the welfare, both of those affected by the breach, neighbours, for example, or those affected by potential action against the breach, in this case the applicants. At that point I'll mention the supplementary matters. We've had a few letters of support, 7 since publication, where neighbours believe the dormer looks fine and they like it. So given that there are other dormers in the street, the degree of harm is not so sufficient that we would wish to take enforcement action.
Thank you, Simon. We have 2 deputations. The first one is from John Middleton, the applicant.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you all today. And I'd also like to apologise. Obviously, my wife and I have never been involved in any planning applications previously to this that we've done at the address. We've lived at the property for 17 years. And we only found ourselves recently in a position to be able to extend it as such that we did. Whilst I'm not here to apportion any blame, advice we were given by builders, etc., was that these changes were suitable, that we could do them, and that's what we've done. But purely from not having the initial knowledge in relation to the factors around it having to be exactly the same as the plans is why it is one of the reasons why it's different. And I want it on record that I accept full responsibility for that and make my apologies to the members and to yourself, Chair, as well. As I say, we've lived in the property for 17 years. We've both been heavily involved in the community. I've been a governor and chair of governors at the local primary school for a number of years, up until recently. My wife was a teacher in Portsmouth for 20 years before being a Portsmouth City Council employee more recently over the last 4 years as a schools reading advisor for the library service. We put our, just one thing I want to touch on, Mr. Turner made reference to, we put our planning application in 2021, April of that year. He made reference to it being approved in 2022, but that's incorrect. It took 2 years and 2 months to be approved. During that time, not only did the cost of the build increase from quotes we had around £30,000 to £35,000, it ended up doubling by the time we did it due to material expense increases, etc., etc. But also during that time, we've seen properties that have now appeared with the cladding and that have looked more modern and more clean cut, etc. And a sort of what we considered a better finish, which was one of the drivers behind why we've done that in the first place. There's a couple of examples of other properties. The 3 nearest properties to us are all clad. 2 of those have examples where part of the rendering of the property is also clad, or also the same colour as the cladding. On the southern side of the curb where we live, we don't have the benefit of the cladding. They're all brick fronted. I think it would look very unnatural to then render the front of the property to match the dormer, which is why we took the extra steps of replacing all the windows, the front door, all the faces, soffits, to match as best possible what is in place at the moment. I've got some photos. Do you mind, Chair, if these are just handed out to members, just to give them a reference of what I'm talking about in relation to the... Thanks.
I believe we can do that. Are they then kept or something? I seem to vaguely remember.
They're just images of the property.
Yeah, we put them on the file. If officers could have some as well,
Yeah.
please.
There's enough there to go round, Chair, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can give those as well, thank you. There's another couple of examples that I'm going to touch on in a minute as well that Councillor Kadir is going to hand out. Just in relation to the window size, the considerations we had by the time the planning consent was approved and the way the room was going to be laid out, our biggest consideration was the privacy around the room. Our actual bed, as it sits within the bay, if we'd have had the larger windows as per the drawings, then the privacy of our bedroom and where our bed is would not be as sufficient as it is now with the current windows. The properties, 2 properties directly opposite me, thank you, both have loft windows, one a dormer, one a Velux, which would have a clear view in through bigger windows. So that was one of our big concerns. I've also, from research I've done, I've not found any other examples in Baffins, and some of these photos are coming around now, where the windows in the square dormers match the size of the windows in the property. I've also found no evidence of anywhere that the cladding is not a suitable finish, like through legalities or what have you, and likewise the size of the windows where it says it needs to be a certain size to be acceptable. All of the correspondence we've had from the start in relation to the property has been predominantly around the cladding and around the issues around it. I've got correspondence from Matthew Garrard, who was the planning officer that raised the enforcement. I've also got correspondence from Emily Bailey, who's one of the enforcement officers at the council, suggesting that if we were to put retrospective plans in as they are, they would be refused. However, if we were to change the material finish of the dormer, that could be considered. But today, Mr. Turner says the cladding is not the particular issue, it's more around the size of the windows. So I'm a little bit confused, may it be, in relation to that. Ultimately, I think from the photos I've provided you, we've put a lot of pride in the property. We've invested a lot of money in it over the last 17 years to improve it and make it look nice, give it excellent curb appeal. And the remark that it's been overly, or it creates a harmful appearance with an overtly dominant appearance which harms the visual amenity of Stanley Avenue, I would challenge. And there are a couple of examples that Councillor Kadir's passed over of bigger dormer windows, one in Idsworth Road, which is very close to me, and another one in a road in Baffins, where the dormers are almost the full width of the properties. One of them you'll see is clad completely in white plastic cladding, which doesn't match anything within the street amenity. And the more recent one in Idsworth Road has 2 very small, narrow, almost like archery hole windows. And again, they don't seem to cause a harmful, overtly dominant appearance, but my smaller dormer seems to, and I just question that. As I say, the comments, we've had 7 neighbours. Do you want me to read the comments out that they've made?
Yeah. Yes, I was just about to say about the timing. No, it's okay. I think it's sufficient that we actually know that there's 7 neighbours who are in support. Of
7 fully supporting immediate neighbours, yeah.
And I think that wraps up the time.
Okay,
as
Chair.
well.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kadir.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in full support of Mr. John Middleton. I have actually walked around Stanley Avenue and asked the neighbours about the issue, and they all seem to be very happy, and it looks really, really nice. So I don't see any issue about the cladding's been there. So I asked the committee and the chair to support his application to retain the cladding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, are there any questions? Councillor Simpson.
Am I right in believing that if this wasn't an applicant of a spouse employing Port City Council, this wouldn't have come to planning committee at all, and you would have just refused it anyway?
We would have exercised delegated powers, yes.
No more questions.
Anyone else have any questions? Any comments? No? Councillor Mason.
This is, in many ways, highly peculiar. Provided that no enforcement action is to be taken, because this does appear to be a minor breach of planning, relatively minor breach of planning control, given the character of the neighbourhood, I would propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone happy to second or to make a comment? Councillor Smythe, do you want to make a comment or do you want a second?
It's a comment. I mean, probably for the same sort of reasons, I would suggest that we did approve this, because having a refusal on if you're trying to sell a property is quite a difficulty and everything else. And really, I have walked around that area, and I went for a cycle ride near a friend's house along the road, and it's they are very varied, these things. There are a lot of variety. It isn't a conservation area. It is neatly done, and given the support, the apparent support from neighbours, which is already really important, actually, I would like to propose that we approve the application.
Okay, so I just need to seek some clarification, because my understanding is for refusal but no enforcement. I think it's a really good question that was raised about whether, if that is the case, is there a further implication beyond this meeting around having a refusal on something, or can we approve it and have no, well, no, then we wouldn't need any enforcement action. Can I have some advice, please, on this one?
Yes. Councillor Smythe's point about having a refusal on on a property can make some difficulty when selling. That's correct. Hence, the public resolution, which would be minuted if it were to be refused, but there's a public resolution, no enforcement action, resolves that question.
Okay.
Can it just be approved if they change the windows? We'll give you approval, but the condition is you've got to change the windows to the original plan, and then it's all ticked the boxes, and it's not been a case of you've got permission, you haven't done what you've gone permission for, and then you've been allowed to keep it anyway, otherwise it kind of sets a bad precedent. So is that a possibility?
They've got approval for... I don't see how that would work. Yeah. I'm not too sure that would work, given what we've got in front of us, which is what the applicant wants, the neighbours want, and there is a no enforcement action decision which would be protective of that.
I mean, they have already got a planning application for something that's of a different design and different facing. So, well, it depends what we feel about the new windows.
Chair, that's actually a greater step than when we're suggesting. That would be more intervention than we're actually recommending.
So, yes, Councillor Mason, and I'll come to Councillor... Oh, sorry, were you next? I will go to you next, Councillor Canalis, and I'll come back to Councillor Mason.
I never know whether to just leave my light on permanently when the conversation I thought that actually the planning officer's recommendation was the right one. So
Yeah.
I will be proposing that we support it. And my comment as to my reason why, I hear what Councillor Smythe has said. The resident has acknowledged they may have made an error of judgment in this, and they are carrying the cost of that. We've learnt that the cost of that is actually not very big if we are getting a public declaration that we are acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think from some of the other things that we've talked about today, there is a principle here that we need to support, which is that you can't just do something and then expect to get away with it. So I think in this instance, they've done something, they've accepted it wasn't quite right, but the decision that it's not worth the investment in either public money to do an enforcement process or private money to fix it, given the circumstances of the area and the street and the rest of it, I think this was a magisterial recommendation, and I will be proposing to accept it.
Councillor Mason has proposed it, so you are seconding if that's acceptable.
In that case, I'm happy to second Councillor Mason's proposal.
Okay. Did anyone want to put a counter proposal? No. Oh. So you...
Counter proposal.
Okay.
This is a thin grey line, isn't
Yeah.
it, Darren?
Okay.
But nobody's seconded it yet.
Okay. Does anyone want to second Councillor Smythe's proposal? Councillor Vallely. Okay, so we have two proposals in front of us. One is to go with, the first is to go with officer's recommendation of refusal and no enforcement action. Those in favour? So Hugh Mason, the one you seconded. That's why I was... This was officer recommendation. So 5 against, 2, okay. Then the second proposal, that
That's
one...
carried, Chair.
I was about to say the second one will fall. The second one will fall because of that. So we, officers' recommendations are approved. Okay. That brings us to the end of the agenda, I believe. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions and the debate and for bearing with me during my first meeting in the chair. And I shall look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time.